All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. My name is Thinker St. James. This is last week's fights. We're going to be going over UFC 309, Jones versus Miocic, talking a little bit about Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, and then taking a look at UFC Macau coming up soon. And to do all of that with me, the Ohio player, my good friend, and the greatest heavyweight mixed martial artist of all time, Chase Parton. How you doing, brother?
Oh, we are good. After a weekend like that, you can't be anything but good coming into Monday because I got a lot to talk about. So I'm ready for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, we can get started here in just a moment. If you are new to the show, we will be talking about every single fight on UFC 309, going over every single one of those. If there is anything that you want to talk about that does not pertain to the fight that we are talking about at the moment, you can throw it in the chat or save it to after the card is over. We'll come back and chat that stuff up at a later time in the stream. But to get it started, UFC 309, Jones versus Miocic, Madison Square Garden, New York, New York. What was your overall impression of this event, Mr. Parton?
I think this was overall a really good card. I thought it was really, really fun. I thought at the end, whether you enjoyed the payout or not, it happened. So that was that. I also will note that because of one fight cancellation between Chris Weidman and Eric Anders, the show started off a little slow. Like I was rushing home to get here at 6, and the show didn't actually start till about 6:30, 6:45. And shout out to them for knowing ahead of time to throw all that stuff in at the beginning, all that talk and the people at the desk. But I was kind of upset they didn't throw that in there a little ahead of time. Dana should have said, "Hey, fights are going to start 30 minutes later," if that was going to be the case. So that was my opinion.
Fair enough. I know that you're a bit of a stickler about the pacing of these shows, so
I want to counter that real quick, and then I will finish. I was thinking maybe I've been a little harsh on the pacing, but I think they've also been sluggish the last couple of weeks. I don't know what it's been. Maybe because we've had a lot of fight issues and people pulling out, but I think it's been very, very sluggish these last couple of weeks. That's just me. Sorry, go ahead.
Understood. No. That's all well and good. I actually really like this event a lot. I thought that it was one of those ones where a lot of people were saying that it was going to be mid. They didn't really think that the quality of the fights was very good, and I think that it delivered in a really great way. There were a couple of really, really good fights on this card, in my opinion. Of course, we're going to talk about all of them here in a minute. I enjoyed it. It was unfortunate that Weidman and Anders was canceled. That was, one that what I had said on the watch along about that was that it was one of the fights that if there were going to be any fights on the card that did get canceled, that was kind of one of the okay ones that you could kind of lose. So I was all right with that in the big picture, in the grand scheme of things. But, having fights drop off is never fun. One other note that was kind of interesting, there's been a lot of talk about it in the Discord and online. I think we touched on it maybe on that impromptu stream a little bit, but the old gloves were in effect on this show. And whether or not it made too much of a difference, I guess, is up to your interpretation. But just an interesting note as to everything. And then now the old gloves are basically what the organization wants to go back to exclusively. And I think you told me that the reason that they're not doing it across the board for all events coming up is because they just don't have the supply for it. Is that the case?
So yes, I think that is something to note. Dana in the post show said that they are moving back to the old gloves, and that for the fight nights they will have the or the new gloves. But that is only because they do not have enough of the old gloves, and they're going to get more manufactured. And I think that is important for this card because everybody was wondering why the veterans got to say, why are the veterans the one that get to change the gloves? And I think it's perfect. I think it makes perfect sense because the veterans would know. They put on the gloves and they instantly knew this is not a good MMA glove. We've been in different promotions. We've been around forever. This is not something that we should be using. Demetrius Johnson did a very good video on it, I'm pretty sure, talking about the Pride gloves and anything like that. But the new gloves, just the veterans knew off rip. And I think that was who you should listen to. Don't listen to the new guys who are saying that they're bad. What do they know? But the people who have been around doing it, they would know good from bad gloves.
Fair. And of course, there was one veteran at the top of the card who say might hold a little bit more water than others, but that's speculation perhaps. Either way, though, I mean, look, if the fighters are happy with going back to the old gloves, then that's fine. People were talking about the amount of knockouts with the new versus the old. I mean, we just had a card at UFC Vegas 100 that was full of knockouts with the new gloves, so I'm a little undecided about that aspect of it. Regardless, whatever is going to make people happy with when it comes to that, make them comfortable. The one thing that I will say, though, is that if the new gloves were supposed to reduce eye pokes, that has been provably false. It did not reduce eye pokes in the slightest. So if that was really the main differentiator, then old gloves are fine if it's going to make everybody happy. So I'm not really to one side or the other on that. It's up to them.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, I think the veterans would know best. So I think it was a good call by them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, shout out to Rick Allen and MMA Honey Badger. What's going on? Good to see you in the chat, sir. But let's get right into the actual fights here. Let's start it off with Veronica Hardy versus Eduarda Mora. Veronica Hardy versus Eduarda Mora. What did you think, sir?
I thought it went exactly how I thought it was going to go. Moira is just way too big for the. I mean, she was already big for the division that she was in, and I'm pretty sure she was fighting down. And then she comes up, and she's like huge compared to Veronica Hardy. I don't think it was the best fight for either of them, but it definitely was something to kick off tonight. We got to see the pretty women.
Yeah. Honestly, like this fight was really like I was glad that this fight did not set a precedent for the quality of the fights to follow, because I really was not super ecstatic about this fight. Watching it, I thought that there were, like a couple of decent moments, maybe, like it was not like really a great display on either side, in my opinion. Mora just does not. I don't know. She doesn't inspire like that feeling that I get when I see a great fighter fight. So I feel like she's a little bit mid. She did get the win. That's fine. Nice UD win across the board, I'm pretty sure. So I know, in all three rounds on at least one judge's card there. So I mean, fine that she got the win. Nothing against that. Hardy is a little bit even shakier as far as my opinion goes. I kind of really don't have all that much to say about this one, other than that it was okay and it happened.
I think one to note is that Veronica Hardy has this she has this personality where she's very jovial, she's very loose, and she doesn't seem like she's taking it very serious. At one point in the early round, she got punched in the face, and then she like put on like a very stern look, so I don't know if she's just like kind of all over the place, not really in the zone kind of deal, but I kind of figured Moira was gonna overpower her, and it's not like she did for the entire fight. She got outstruck, but I think it was very convincing that Moira was winning every round, or
Yeah.
close to every round.
I mean, do you think that she's going to have more problems when she's up against women who are a little bit more evenly sized?
Yeah, she's not very good.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I like, perhaps she'll prove us wrong with that, but it just seems like if she's coming in a little bit bigger. I know that she had missed weight in her first two fights, I believe, and this is the first time that she actually like made weight.
Going up a class,
Going
yeah.
up, you're right, going up a class, exactly. So I mean, if she's going to stay there, then that's probably better for that element of it. But she's going to have a whole different crop of competition that's going to not be of the caliber of Veronica Hardy. So we'll see what ends up happening with her going forward. This was not the most inspired performance, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we kind of all knew that Veronica Hardy was mid. I think more questions were on the line of Moira coming in at undefeated before the last split decision in her last fight.
Right.
She just still does not look like somebody who was once undefeated at 10-0. It's
Yeah, no, I agree. And shout out to Anakin, of course, but to his point here that well, actually, sorry, this one that Hardy had an off night. I mean, she was coming in at 9-4, now 9-5. I mean, off nights are starting to add up a little bit. So if that's, you know what I mean, like if it's an off night, they can't continue to stack. Is all I'm saying. So right now, she's really got to pull it together and decide if she wants to really stay around with all of that, because the organization's not going to like it, whether or not she's wife of Dan
on
or
the
whatever,
on
or
the
any other reason.
on the contrary, I think less expectations are put on Veronica now. We've seen a lot of women with shit records in the UFC, and they stick around. Veronica
That's a good
Hardy's
point.
she's a pretty lady. People seem to want to watch her. She can be the first fight of the night. She's a seat filler, for those prelim fights, whatever. And she can stay around for a little bit. I think it's very possible. She might be a good negotiator. Her husband might be able to lean her in the right direction of how to keep a contract. So who knows?
Sure. Well, I mean, I just know that he's had some issues with the organization himself in the past, of course, former commentator who is no longer on the commentary team specifically. But if she's going to be able to come out here and show out at some point going forward, then that's fine. You are correct that there are, I think, a little bit larger bandwidths for women when it comes to the record, because there are some women who we have said in the past, like, it's kind of crazy that they're still around, but it'd just be nice to see some definitive steps in the right direction. That's what you want to see for all these fighters, right? Consistent improvement, growth, forward motion.
Yeah, you actually made a good point. The women they can just do whatever the fuck they want. Seems like a lot of them miss weight. A lot of them have really shit records, and they somehow seem to just stay around. So
Female privilege, bro.
we talk about equality, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Across the board. Let's get it even. Anyway, all right. Well, that was that. Do you have anything else to say about that one?
Nope, that one's it.
All right. So let's move on to Basil Haifez versus Oban Elliott, the Welsh gangster. What did you think of that finish, my guy?
Three things.
Sure.
I want to first say Wales is not on the way out. I apologize, guys. When you get a finish like this, hey, you can stay around. Two, I think this was on its way to being a very, very snooze fest. Oh my gosh, this fight. When I was doing the reaction for it, I was watching myself. I don't even know what I was doing. Like, I was doing anything to not watch this fight at that point. And then I look over, I'm like, oh shit, there it goes. And I think it just goes to show, if you come out here and you have a boring fight and you're able to finish, and I don't even look, you just got to make it fun in the after. You got to be charismatic and have a good little dance afterwards, because I was all on board. Oban's my boy after the WWE shit, Hulk Hogan belt, NWO stuff. It was awesome. And I think Grant Dawson could learn a lesson. All you got to do is be cool after you get a finish. And I probably won't have too much to say, because you can have a boring fight, and this is exactly where the sport is what it is. It's blink and you miss it type things like this. And these are those split seconds, or what are gonna make people superstars, or are gonna make them people that I talk about on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all the after the fight stuff for sure. He's definitely a talker in a good way. I think. I mean, I liked that he was cool he was cool and cocky, but cocky in a way that was like accessible as opposed to being abrasive, which is a fine line sometimes. Sometimes people can get away with it pretty well. Of course, we have Charles Radke, who we just talked about recently, who kind of skirts it on the other side of the equation, but I still fuck with that too. So, I mean, it's a sliding scale with that, but I think that the stuff he was saying was definitely like, I could get behind that. So I was happy with that. In the fight, I thought that he had some really nice leg kicks early. Oban Elliott we're talking about. I thought Haifez was landing in better volume for the first 2 rounds, but apparently the commentary seemed to think that Elliott had taken those first 2 rounds as well. And I was like, I thought that was kind of crazy to me. I mean, they at one point Rogan's like, oh yeah, he's definitely winning this fight. I'm like, what? Are we watching the same thing? I mean, but who knows? Maybe there was stuff I was missing, but it definitely seemed like Hafez was, and also Hafez was feeling himself a lot during that fight. I mean, he was kind of showboaty a little bit. We always say that can come back to bite you. Obviously, it did here. I just thought he didn't look half bad. I mean, like it was a little bit of a boring-er fight just because it was really point fighting. But I mean, I thought that for that style of fight, he was doing pretty well. And then just that bomb overhand, really nicely placed right on the freaking nose, just obliterated him. So good job for Elliott to turn it around and make it a banger thereafter. But yeah, anyway, comments?
Yes, very much. I think you were watching the wrong fight for sure, because Oban Elliott, yes, he was not doing much, but he was, countering and leading the charge. He was leading the dance, I would say.
He was putting pressure on. That's true.
He was staying active with with a lot of different mixed variety of strikes. And I think in the corner, Hafez, he was asking who was up in the fight, and I'm pretty sure his corner said that he was up 2-0. And I honestly, even looking at the stats here, how do you land 24 strikes going into the third? And that's all you did was strike. Like, how were you possibly winning? Maybe one if you got 24 in one of them, maybe. But I think that was crazy. And to Anakin's point, or not Anakin, I'm sorry, to Deadly Pube, yes, some judge did have Hafez up 2-0, which again, looking back at the stats, how is that even possible? How is that even fucking possible?
I mean, well, there you go. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I thought he looked like as far as the actual throws, looked like he was more active. He wasn't necessarily pushing the pace the same as Elliott was, but I thought that when it actually came to the landing, that he was doing his thing. I don't know. It seemed like everything was going pretty well for him up until the knockout. I mean, that's what makes horse races, I suppose. I don't know.
I think also to note is this Hafez dude, he went to split decision with Jack Della Maddalena.
Yep.
Then he loses to Mickey Gall, and then he gets knocked out by Oban Elliott. I mean,
did he lost the fight to Mickey Gall?
Oh, I'm sorry, he beat my. I mean,
yeah,
honestly, it wasn't. He could have lost. He could have won. Either way, if you're competitive with Mickey Gall, clearly, it ain't that fucking good.
Yeah.
So
well, he was styling on Gall for those first 2 rounds, and then Mickey Gall somehow lit the fire under his own ass for that third round. Like, where was that the entire rest of that fight? But either way, yes, that is a point. I think shout out to the base goddess. She also made that point. You should not be going to decision with Mickey Gall in 2024 or 2023, whenever that one was.
Yeah, and it's a good point is like, even if you did beat Mickey Gall, you're not even higher on him on the next card that you guys fight. I think it's very telling that we know that you're just not a draw, and 2, just not somebody that people care about seeing fight. And Oban Elliott, I think this was maybe not. Listen, he's been getting a lot of decisions. This is somebody they probably knew he could finish. He was minus 300, and Oban can throw some hands, and he did get it done. Like I said, blink and you miss it type of thing. He really set up that strike, and it landed.
It was picture perfect, man. You watch that replay. I thought it was cool during this event that we had that cool camera that did that pan around camera thing. That was pretty neat. I've seen that, I think, on broadcasts before, so it's not like it's a new technology, but
they're starting to use it more.
Correct, and it was cool that they used it for this one because, yeah, when you saw the placement of it from all of those angles, it was like, man, everything was exactly correct for that shot to be exactly what it ended up being. So, Oban Elliott, I mean, he was one that I kind of was a little skeptical of, to be perfectly honest, coming into the organization.
Still am.
I'd say that he hasn't necessarily proven just yet. I mean, he's still in the process of it, so nothing wrong with what he has done at this point and what he will continue to do, hopefully. But he was the guy that came in off the Contender Series, talking a really, really heavy game after kind of eking it out in a way that was not super impressive early on, but a performance like that will change the narrative very quickly. So congratulations to him. And to the point that you had made earlier, Wales, stand up. You got yourself a guy. And now, especially now that Jack Shore is on kind of a backslide a little bit, it seems like. And then there was that female fighter
Corey
from Wales.
McKenna.
Yeah, exactly. Corey McKenna, out now as well. So Wales needs a new star and looks like you might have one. So hopefully you can keep winning.
last point is this is the first fight, and I say the first fight, which it only being the second fight of the night, where we see the refs blatantly not give a shit. This was kind of a late stoppage. Hafez took a lot of unanswered strikes after he got knocked down. Um, he got rocked a few times, went out, woke up, went out again, like, and Oban was just smashing him. So it wasn't the worst, but it was very telling going forward for the next fights going on.
Yeah, yeah, we'll definitely be talking about some of the reffing choices. I know that you've got a couple more points on that one. Yeah, this one I don't recall seeing it and thinking, wow, that was like super late. But again, obviously, I wasn't paying as close attention to this fight as I should have been. I mean, I rewatched it too, so I don't know. Maybe I'm just perceiving things differently than the rest of the world. But there are certainly ones coming up that were much more blatant that I'm sure that we'll be on the same page about. So either way, though, good win for Oban Elliott, and hopefully he can continue to keep the trend going. I mean, this is what Wales needs. I mean, Wales is kind of like a smaller nation in that region, right? So it's like it's nice to see them having their own representation in the sport.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, speaking of Mickey Gall, let's move on to his fight with Ramiz Brahimaj. Brahimaj is the dude I posted on Twitter before this fight that his record was kind of crazy. But if you saw that tweet and used it to your advantage when it came to the betting, it would have paid off because Brahimaj was on. I mean, I don't have it in front of me, so the numbers might be slightly off, but I think it was a 6-fight win streak. Then he goes into a literal candy cane. I mean, this was like not even just
Mm-hmm.
a one and then two of one and then one back. It was like 1-2, 1-2, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win. He did that for like I want to say something like 11 fights. I mean, like he had been on and off for like 11 fights or something, and then it was 2 decisions. He gets knocked out. 2 decisions not in his favor as far as the losses go. So it was like a weird set of circumstances as far as his record went. But if you saw all of that, then you would know that he was on a loss. So the next one was going to be a win. He ends up getting the first round knockout. I feel some sort of cosmic vindication for that otherwise confusing tweet.
Yeah, this one I think was very fun initially because Brahima he has some intensity, some that you kind of want to get behind. Like he doesn't seem like he's the most charismatic, but he seems like he is bringing it every when he want bringing it to the fight. The fact Mickey Gall was the favorite is honestly insane. Looking at that, I remember in the watch along making the comment that Mickey Gall, in my opinion, from what I remember, doesn't get finished too often. If he does, or if there is a finish, he's normally the one choking him out, kind of deal. I was very wrong watching him get slept up against the cage by this dude. But I think also to note is I rewatched this with my dad, and Brahima took some pretty clean shots from Mickey Gall before this, the end sequence went on. I think that'll be very telling for his next fight. Like you said, he's already lost a bunch, so it's not going to be surprising if he loses and gets knocked out or takes a bunch of shots and gets a beating to decision. But Mickey Gall was definitely the opponent for him to beat. And this is what you should do against Mickey Gall in 2024.
Right. And I mean, and it is unfortunate because Mickey Gall is really now sort of this was like a make or break fight. Commentary was even talking about that, which is somewhat rare, I would say. You don't really hear the commentary team basically sounding the same way that we sound when it's like, yeah, this guy really needs to win this fight or he's not going to have a job anymore. It's like you don't often hear them getting to that point with the commentary, but they were kind of saying it themselves. So it is a little bit sad to see Mickey Gall in that position because I mean, it's what I had said before going into the fight. Like I did think that Mickey Gall had an odd career in general based on the CM Punk stuff and maybe getting slightly hot shotted off of that when it wasn't necessarily the right way, the right person for it, all of those things. Like I think he got thrust into a spotlight that he didn't necessarily that he wasn't ready for. But now, I mean, at this point in his career, he's been around for quite some time. And as Anakin said here, 7-7, that's really, when the numbers are that even in the wins and the loss columns, like I would not be surprised if we see the roster tracker popping him up at some point soon. So it's unfortunate for that. But as far as Brahimai went, yeah, I mean, all of those things that you had mentioned were true. He does maybe need to work on the defense just a little bit because he leaves himself open just a little bit. He also goes for things that I think he needs to pace better. Like when because like there was one point where he was landing some really nice uppercuts with like the hand in the back of the head, like the half tie clinch kind of deal. Like, you know, he had the one hand and he was going for the uppercuts. And I'm like, that was working nicely for him then. But I remember on the Contender Series, like only a couple of weeks ago, I was saying like you leave yourself so open when you do that. Like a guy who like sees that happening or like recognizes the hand on the back of the head is going to be able to like either get out of the way, you know, like drop under the hand, like turn their body. There's a number of different ways that you can leave yourself very open by doing that. So just got to work on a couple of fundamental elements. And at this stage in his career, it's like, is he actually going to do that? Who knows? But either way, I mean, you know, the right hand on the temple landed flush, Gall goes down. That's really the end of the story on that part of it. And nice to see him get that win after being off. I think they said he had like some kind of like maybe eye surgery, I want to say, or something. There was some kind of deal that like had him sidelined for like a while, like extended layoff. So good to see him come back and get himself a nice win.
Yeah, I feel like I'm actually very surprised to check his record actually and look at how many losses he has and how recent they are compared to like the wins. I after this I would have thought that this was like an upcoming prospect, like a good dude, and then like oh my god he finished Mickey Gall. Okay, what he should do now he's on to the next. But like this is just a dude like looking at the odds like he really wasn't even supposed to beat Mickey Gall. So shout out to him, making that underdog performance, but going forward, it's like, what can you really expect?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's remains to be seen. Perhaps this is Ramiz Brahimai 2.0. And I believe I want to say it was this no. Sorry. Take that back. I remember what I was going to say. Not this fight. But either way, this could be this could be the new and improved version of this guy. I mean, come back and prove it. Just go out and prove it. That's all you got to do. And he's with a knockout like that. That's the first piece of what could be a very nice run. So good for him on that one. And I also wanted to say that I very much liked his little nipple hat.
Okay, yes, I know what you're talking about. Yes, and he put it on Joe, and
He did.
Conehead Joe was started. Yeah, that was a weird hat. Don't know what region that is from. Never seen it before, but would love to see it again.
Yeah, that was definitely like hats of the UFC is going to be a potential video at some point coming up because that was a unique one. That's one that I hadn't seen before either. And to the point with Joe Rogan that you just brought up there, it stayed with Joe Rogan, and I know that because at one point they cut to the commentary table and it was sitting right there. So perhaps Joe Rogan is collecting these hats.
Yes, he's got. I would hope so. I hope he's got a little trophy section of mannequin heads that he puts the hat on.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. So cool hat, good win. Shout out to Ramiz Brahimai. All right. On to the next one. So everybody out here counting out my man, Marcin Tybura, who was fighting Jonathan Janice. What'd you think of him this time there, Chase?
I think not only was I very wrong by the time I had my final assessment of what I thought was going to happen, Jonathan Denise, I unfortunately you're just another heavyweight, but Marcin Tybura, you made a fight that was almost the worst performance that I'm watching ever into one of the most gruesome matches that I'm watching. Like right before my eyes, again, blink and you miss it type of thing. It's like 1 second they're just laying on each other. It's like, all right, I'm gonna go get some chips from the table. You come back and a dude's just in a pool of blood, like just. And this is another one that I rewatched and showed my dad, and I unfortunately watched the whole first round, misremembering, thinking, all right, wait for the end of the first round. That's when it's gonna get crazy. So I watched the whole round of them laying on each other back to back twice. It was awful. I cannot tell you why Tybura didn't do that at all in the first round, why he didn't do it at all at the beginning of the second round, in the middle of the second round, why the last 30 seconds is when he decided to throw a single elbow. But as you see, it is one of the most effective strikes in the game. And I actually think it's crazy. It's like if Jonathan would have just taken the blunt elbow strikes instead of pushing him off and then getting sliced by the elbows, he probably would have been in a better situation, because once that first cut happened and he just kept smashing him, like the blood started spurting, and you knew shit was over. So it was bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that Tybura didn't really get that off in the first because he was still shaking off the cobwebs from getting stunned pretty heavily early on in that round. I mean, that's a convenient excuse. I don't think that that's 100%, but he did get stunned. So, Denise definitely has some hands. I mean, he was able to lay that shot on when both of them were still really fresh. So, good there. But I mean, yeah, this was the Marcin Tybura show over here. I mean, he really was able to control a whole hell of a lot. Like you said, I actually had made the point on the watch along that I thought that Mora in the first fight was fighting a little bit like Andrei Arlovsky. I was very, very nervous that this fight was going to be similar in that Tybura was going to do the same thing. Thankfully, the elbows kind of saved us from having to have that be a repeat there, but those elbows were really nasty. That laceration across Janice's eyes was nuts, man. It looked like a sword just slashed straight across. He had the cut over one eye, across the bridge of the nose, and the cut over the other eye. It was like right down the same line. So really, really slicing elbows. You're absolutely correct that elbows are one of the most dangerous, if not the most dangerous, strikes that you can throw, especially at that range and in that situation. Interesting end to this fight, though, because of all of that. Like you said, it happened later in that second round. Gets picked up by the corner to go to the stool. That was a point of contention with a lot of people. We had looked on the watch along. We have the unified rules and a nice little binder there. So we had looked, and we didn't see any language about a fighter being helped back to the stool in the actual unified rules. There might be some rules that are different per commission, so that could be there might be some point to be made there. But either way, odd stoppage because the doctor ended up stopping it before the start of the third round. Even though Janice was on his feet at the time and seemed with it, he stopped it due to quote unquote wobbly legs. Even though it probably should have been stopped at the end of the second when the strikes were happening.
I'm glad you made the point about him getting picked up by the corner. I think DC freaked out about it on the broadcast, like, whoa, his corner came and picked him up. And like, in my opinion, I'm thinking like, well, yeah, they're trying to get, like, they got to hurry up and get to the corner. Like, I mean, they're just in the zone. Like, we got to get our fighter to the corner. Let's get him cleaned up and ready for the next round. It's like, what are you gonna do? Just let him lay there? He probably would have got up eventually, but like, come on, let's get to the corner. Let's get the next.
Well, I think that the idea is that you're not supposed to be able, well, at least in the theory that people would be going with if it was not a legal thing to do, is that the fighter needs to be able to get up off of their own accord. You know what I mean? Like they have to have the wherewithal to stand and intelligently get themselves back to the stool.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately, Anakin made a good point. Orabai and Aldana, they were able to fight, but I probably thought those should have been stopped as well. I'm not the judge here, but this one, he was fucked up, guys. Even talking to the doctor, he's like, I'm okay, 100%. It's like, dog, I can see you, and if you're just lying to me right now, you're gonna tell me this is 100%, 100%. Like you could have said 75. I probably would have believed you and let you go, but you were that delusional, clearly fucked up. Like your face was destroyed. If we would have let you go on, you probably would have went blind or something. Bro, you had cuts like on your eyes. Like it was bad. The nose was gonna be fucked. I'm pretty sure his teeth were broke. Like he's bleeding all in his mouth. Like bro, it was bad. He was fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, in the moment, I thought that it was an okay stoppage, honestly. Like based on everything that we saw at the end of the round. Now, see, that's also one of those things that gets into a little bit of an odd territory, though, because it's not the doctor's place to fix the mistake of the referee. I mean, I believe that was
it should have been stopped. Yeah,
that was my opinion, honestly. I mean, like the amount of damage that he was taking that was unanswered when those strikes were coming down. I mean, like, because the thing is that the clapper sounds, so you have those 10 seconds, but pretty much the majority of the blunt strikes were all in that 10-second window. So Herb is trying to like let the the horn save him. And it's like, which is, I can understand that aspect of it, because you want to give these guys as much of an opportunity to fight as you can and all that kind of stuff. It's short time left on the clock. This would have been a situation, and I think Rogan even said that too, where he was like, look, I would have been happy if Herb had stopped it with like 1 or 2 seconds left. Like, it would have been okay. I was kind of in that camp. So it's not the doctor's place to make that call. However, it probably, like, all things considered, if you shake it out that way, then I was okay with it. It could have gone to the third as well. Again, it's one of those gray areas. This is exactly why I am interested in the rules and regulations of the sport, is for situations exactly like this. What is the protocol for it, and what should have happened versus what did happen? So, I guess you can kind of feel how you want to feel about it. They handled it how they wanted to handle it, and I guess we got to move on with that information going forward now.
I think it's also the point. It's like the UFC is the best of what they do, and we unfortunately should never have to see somebody die in the fucking cage. And these are one of the times where I'm sitting here thinking, like, if they would have let this go one more round, and Herb would have done his half step in, let me see if he's good. Like, bro, like Jonathan Denise is gonna have a face that is fucked up. Like, I know Tybura probably would have just laid on him another round, feeling bad. But in theory, you let that go on after what you just saw. Imagine it gets back to that point. It's like he already did like all the work he needed to do. It's over at that point. If he gets back to it, it's just gonna be a massacre. So
Yeah, fair point. And actually, shout out to Checkmate MMA over here, saying, ask the ref. That is something that hopefully we will be able to do at some point on a stream coming up on this channel in the future. So we'll organize that. But Checkmate has a former UFC or a referee who has refed fights for the UFC in the past on their show. So at some point, maybe we can get an expert's opinion about this. We'll have to get that worked out. But as far as this fight goes, I also thought that Tybura showed that there are levels to this game, and also made it so that heavyweight might continue to suck for a long, a long time more to come, because that was the big thing about this fight. We talked about it a couple of times coming into it, is that Janice was going to get a heavy, heavy jump going into the top 10 with this fight if he had won it. Obviously, they're trying to bring some new blood into the heavyweight division, shake that up because of the lack of greatness that we've seen, as in relative terms, in the heavyweight division, except for the very, very top of it. And now that does not happen. So, any opinion about that?
no, not really. I think the only point that I have left for Tybura is kind of along with Deadly Pew. Tybura is at least decent enough to wrestle these upcoming prospects that have no wrestling ability. But unfortunately, there is a dude at the top who is so much better at wrestling than Tybura that it literally doesn't even matter. Tybura has nothing left here. He could just stay in the middle of the pack. That's just what he's going to have to do. He already lost to Tom Aspinall, and then he lost to fucking Sergey Spivak with his grappling. So they're like, you're only going to be able to beat the Jonathan Denise of this fucking division at this point. Shout out Tybura, though. Go get your money.
Chase Parton is a Marcin Tybura hater. I don't know if that's come through, but that does seem to be the case here. No, I mean, I thought it was a good win overall. After all said and done, with the large amount of control within activity that we were talking about, alluding to a little bit earlier, those elbows were really, really nasty. It was good that he was able to get them off. Janice obviously needs to shore up a couple of holes in his game. There's nothing to say that he can't come back and make a name for
Knock
himself.
out another dude. They're going to give him a can, so sure, he's going to get another knockout.
And there just seem to be enough of them in the heavyweight bracket to make that the case. So it's like, if that's what's going to happen, then that's what's going to happen. I mean, like, it is going to take, and we've said it time and time again, I hate to be a broken record about it, but it bears repeating, it is going to take legitimate mixed martial arts skill in heavyweight for this situation to change. That is the end of the story when it comes to that. If you do not have guys who drill all of the fundamental elements of being a mixed martial artist, aside from just being big and knocking people out, or just being big and a slightly better wrestler than, someone at light heavyweight, like, this is what you are going to get until there are actual well-rounded mixed martial artists in the division. So if you can find those guys, bring them in. They'll probably have a decent shot. If you cannot, then basically we just have to wait for Jones and Aspinall to to finally happen, and then see from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a good point. I mean, I'll save the Jones and Aspinall talk for
Of
later.
course,
So
yeah, I
yeah,
didn't even
yeah.
really mean to bring it up. I'm just, in the
Well, I think
context
I
of
brought it up first with Aspinall, but yeah, I mean, I think Tybura, it's like you can keep moving up with beating opponents like this, but you're only gonna move down once you get to decent heavyweights.
Right, and that's why we've been on this carousel with a number of them for what seems like years for at this point. I mean, it's this merry-go-round of these same guys fighting each other, having to do, Marcin Tybura and Sergey Spivak fucking three in a couple of years or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just like it's how many times are these guys going to have to keep running into each other because it's just a revolving door of the same couple of guys who are just good enough to stay in the rankings.
Yeah, I think to Anakin's point, I don't think Blades is the next matchup that I would say for Tybura. I'm gonna go ahead and say Mick Parkin. We'll see what happens there. Tybura probably gets pieced up on the feet, but if Mick Parkin is one of these tall dudes that can't get up off the ground, I'm not gonna say I'm gonna root for Tybura. I would never put money on him again, but he may be able to pull off a dub. Like I said, anybody that doesn't have wrestling, Tybura at least has the game plans that he's gonna wrestle them, and that's a plus. He's not gonna. Well, actually, to that point, he did try to stand with Denise and almost got fucking knocked. So I guess maybe it wasn't the game planning; it was more of I can't stand with him anymore. So I don't know. Maybe Tybura needs some work still, but he's old as dirt. It's not really gonna change.
Well, we'll see what ends up happening there. I mean, really, I'm just waiting for some legitimate new blood. I know that Checkmate has talked about Pat Brady a couple of times that I have heard. So if he's somebody who's really about it, then get him on the show, get him to the big show one way or another, and we'll see if that prediction is true or not. So.
Deadly Pube, Cortez Acosta, Waldo. That is a good matchup too. We've seen Waldo's wrestling offensively. What will he do if he's not the wrestler on top? I don't think much, but I'm not going to put too much faith in Tybura. He probably will lose to all the names that we've just said.
Perhaps. I mean, again, I just have to leave it at we have to wait and see what ends up happening because that just seems to be the grand narrative for like 90% of the division right now. We need some real new blood that is well rounded. That's just where it ends,
100%.
So there you go. But as of right now, at least, good win for Marcin Tybura. Back to the drawing board for Jonathan Janice. Moving on here to what I thought was probably fight of the night. This is David Onama versus Roberto Romero. Romero debuting on short notice. This was his first in the organization on short notice. Both men fighting up a weight. This was taking place at, or was supposed to take place at lightweight. Ended up being a catchweight fight, and Romero ended up missing even the catchweight limit. So unfortunate that
That's not this fight. I don't think that's this fight.
That is this fight. It's definitely this fight.
No, that's Hoofy and James Irontop.
No. Oh, that was the one that was no. That was all. Wait a second. Okay, no. This one was that was the catch. Okay, so maybe that was the catch weight one. This is the one that they were both fighting up a weight, and he missed the higher weight. Then
maybe, yeah.
That is because I know that was the case. That was a big narrative in this fight that that Romero moved up, but that he missed weight because of the short notice aspect of it.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm
not too sure. He did not make weight, right?
I'm not too sure about this one. I know for a fact later Hoofy and Irontop was a catchweight, and James Irontop still missed the catchweight. I know that one.
Okay. All right. Well, then you know what? Let's strike it from the record if that's not accurate. I just know that both of them were fighting up a weight. So
one day. Wait, respect to Romero. 1 day notice taking. Oh, okay. So 1 day notice. So maybe he did miss. That would make sense. You can't just make weight on a day's notice or whatever it is. But yeah, okay. Can you go on with what you're saying? I just wanted to make that point and make sure we got the record.
For sure. No, I appreciate that. I got you. But either which way, I mean, short notice fight for Romero coming in, debuting on that, and he came out here to fucking bang. This guy was really out here wanting to win this fight as opposed to just being the guy that David Onama was going to walk through. I mean, this dude dropped Onama in the first. Then he himself also got dropped. also in the first round. So, I mean, very competitive from the start of this fight. The biggest note that I have about this fight that I thought made it the real standout of this card was the variety of attacks on both sides. I mean, both these guys were really throwing the kitchen sink out there, kicks, punches, knees, elbows. They were really going after it, both of them. So I quite enjoyed this fight. I thought it was extremely competitive.
Yeah, looking at the numbers, it was pretty crazy to watch the plus 1,000 drop the other guy. You know, the minus 2,500 favorite, you know, getting knocked down in the first round. That is pretty insane work. A lot of people were questioning what Onama was doing, why he was starting off so slow. I personally don't remember if I probably have seen him, but I can't remember if it was a standout performance or anything last time. I just know that Roberto, I mean, he was putting pressure on Onama that wasn't going to let him get in his rhythm. That's what was happening.
Sure.
Onama started off really slow because Roberto started off like at 150% and was ready to finish this fight. And I'm honestly surprised he didn't. You know, just how good he looked in that first round. But, you know, it is a 3-round fight, and Onama did start to get rhythm and just wear down on the numbers, which I'm actually upset looking at 30-27 across the board. The fact that the first round couldn't have been to the other to Roberto in maybe one judge's eyes is kind of nuts. But you know, they had to keep up with the quota for the minus 2,500.
Fair. Yeah, no, I did have the note though that I would have been very nervous watching this fight based on a minus 1,400 price tag on Onama on the book that I had. So, you know, very competitive, all things considered. With that, Onama's punches, man, this dude punches so goddamn hard and with extreme intention. Like in every punch that he throws, he sticks every shot. Like there was one time that Romero was on the ground, and it was the type of shot that like you'll see people just pepper shots from the top, like if they're standing and just throwing downward. That, you know, it's just a couple of shots just to keep the action going. You know, a couple extra little points here and there. He was throwing those shots to the point that you could hear them audibly on the broadcast. So I'm like, this dude really, like, he locks in. He is also very calm and collected in there as well. And then when he throws, man, this guy really can thud. So definitely a dude to keep an eye on as far as his power goes. He's really swinging for the fences.
Yeah, 100%. This was, like you said, fight of the night candidate, if not fight of the night. And it was just a really fun fight to watch. Like normally, this felt like I want to, because when you're talking about the weights, I'm looking at it, I'm like, lightweight. Gosh, these dudes fought like flyweights. Like this was firefight whole
Yeah.
time.
Well, they definitely both were fighting up a weight class. That
Yeah.
I know for sure. So,
Okay.
you know, and that might also have been part of the weight discrepancy stuff. But
And why they were maybe able to go for so long, so quick, because they're not, you know, draining themselves as much as they would.
And to the fight that you had mentioned, the James Yantop and Mauricio Hoofy fight, which we will talk about, that's definitely a point that I'll be making in that one. So, you know, the difference that you have not having to cut, you know, the freshness element of it certainly played a part. And in that fight, I would say, and then perhaps in this one as well. But really good competitive fight on both sides. You know, Onama definitely deserved the win in the end. I do agree with you, though. There probably was a round in there that could have gone Romero's way, at least on one judge's card. Like you said, it's throw the guy a bone a little bit, really. But regardless of that aspect of it, I do think that this is the exact type of performance that if you are going to lose like Romero, lose this way, because this is the type of performance that will keep you around even in a loss. This could have been a one-off, you know, a walk-on contract, and then you're right back down to, you know, fighting in LFA. I mean, this is exactly how you make a statement in this organization that you belong here, that you deserve to be here. And I think that a lot of fighters coming in on short notice or, you know, just stepping in to fill a slot could take a page out of Roberto Romero's book.
I think you're completely right. And I think I was thinking about how I wanted to make this point is like a lot of people you see, they're willing to take that debut fight on short notice and they're willing to go in there and try to win. But what they have to do, and shout out to Roberto for being the guy to take that fight. But if you want to be the guy to stick around, you got to be more than willing to do that more than once. It's not just I step in on short notice just to get into the league or to the promotion. Now you got to think about, if do I want to be that guy that everybody is going to want to watch? I have to be willing to take those opportunities again. It's not just a one and done thing. It's like, do you want to be the dog in the sport? You got to take those fights, be ready to fight, show up, take more short notice fights. I'm not saying take them all, but those are where the opportunities are going to come for you, and that's where you're going to get your stripes in this sport.
For sure. I mean, it's the same basic point that we make about the Contender Series fighters in general, right? I mean, this is not the end of the road. This is literally the beginning of the road. So,
Yeah,
you did your thing on the Contender Series. Now you got to prove it in the big show. He did his thing in the big show. Now you got to prove it again because you didn't get the win. But either way, I mean, every fight is that way to an extent for everybody fighting. So go in there and continue the intensity that you have. And I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on Roberto Romero, definitely keeping that name in the back of my mind because I really enjoyed watching him fight.
yeah. The thing is, though, he is a man. We talked about equality with the women. His record, though, he is reaching that one more loss area is already bad for somebody in their second UFC fight.
Yeah, this is
So
this is a good point for sure. Well, wait, you said it was his second?
well, I'm
Oh,
saying
you
if
mean going into the next one? Gotcha,
going
gotcha. Yeah.
into the next one, yeah, if he's that's not looking too good.
Yeah, hopefully for his sake, he doesn't go up against like a future champion kind of deal that or somebody that ends up way higher up in the rankings very quickly or whatever. That would
Yeah.
be he'd be a collateral damage at that point. But the way to make it so that you are that guy as opposed to the other dude is to go out and fight the way that he did here. So do your thing, Roberto. Made a fan out of me.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and of course, shout out to David Onama for being the other side of that coin and putting on a great performance of his own.
Yeah, and to make that point is this is a performance that I would classify. I'm not going to say he didn't dominate the fight, but this is a 30-27 where you could go into the post fight and say I dominated the fight. Like I had a great fight. We're going to talk about later somebody who got on the mic and talked about domination and they didn't do anything close to what this 30-27 was. So just make that point early.
Yeah. Keep that in the back of your mind because I know exactly what you are talking about there. But before we get to that fight, let's move on to Jim Miller versus Damon Jackson. Jim fucking Miller. We were talking last episode about why is this fight happening? What's going to happen with this fight? All of those things. Did Jim Miller's performance change your mind about the quality of this fight, Chase Parton?
A few things.
That wasn't a yes. So go for it.
Shout out to Jim Miller. I really think it is awesome, right? And that he's still doing it at his age. But again, I asked why this fight was happening, and clearly the UFC knew this was an easy fucking win from Jim Miller because Damon Jackson is downright one of the most pitiful. He's not a UFC fighter anymore because he's fucking retired. That it is just ridiculous that you come in here against an old ass man and you get subbed. It was the first round. Yeah, in the first round, you get subbed by a fucking guillotine that generally don't even work that often compared to how much they're thrown in the sport and how much they finish. It's like Damon fucking Jackson. You let the oldest dude on the roster, right? I'm pretty sure, maybe Jan is
definitely the most tenured anyway.
Oh, okay. And you let him put you into retirement. Think about that long and hard. The old bull sent the young buck into retirement. It's just not even how it's supposed to work. And Damon Jackson, they didn't even pan the camera on you putting your gloves in the ring. They didn't even put the camera on the gloves in the cage. And very warranted, you did not deserve that shit. You came out here and you stunk. Shout out Jim Miller, though.
Damn, tell them how you really feel, Chase. Well, you made the point that you had previously said about people jumping guillotine not being overly effective at the high levels. This was a nice example of it working exactly how it should if you're going to do it. I thought that Jim Miller recognizing that he had the opening and taking it and securing it 100% was like that. You should show that to people who are even remotely thinking about ever jumping guillotine. Like this is what it needs to look like if you are going to go for it, because if not, it's going to be a big problem for you, which is often how it ends up more times than not. So, I mean, good for Jim Miller to be able to actually secure it when he did go for it. But the other point that had been previously mentioned by me on this show was, what did I say about Damon Jackson making poor decisions when it comes to takedowns? the exact note that I had when he was going up against Chepe Mariscal, shooting for takedowns that weren't there. This was not even necessarily the exact same thing, but still in the same wheelhouse in the sense that this dude was shooting the takedown that he was going for was extremely sloppy. And I hate to dog the guy, especially after Chase just dogged the fuck out of him. But if you go back and watch it, he starts the takedown off almost on the side of Jim Miller's body and sort of tries to swing himself into the front of him to wrap around it. Well, when you're doing that, you're starting off, it's like now you're telegraphing all of the motion that you have to do to get from the side all the way over to the front of the body. Jim Miller is just reading all of that in real time. Okay, you're going for my legs. Okay, you're not in the position for it. Okay, now you are. Now your head is. So I mean, like, you know, all of the things that you were doing just led exactly to what ended up happening here. So it's an unfortunate end to the fight and to his career, but it was I can't say I told you so because I definitely didn't predict that one, but it does go to the basic point that I was making before, that poor decision making when it comes to these takedowns really have hindered the progress of Damon Jackson, and now of course that progress is no more. So you know, yeah, shout out to Jim Miller is definitely right. The Iron Man of the sport, getting the job done. I thought that was really cool. And at first, you'll go back and watch the watch along. I get a little bit of egg on my face, as I often do, because I thought that Jim Miller was retiring off of that. And I was like, that would have been a beautiful way to go out. I was like, that is one of those, or, you know, had that been the case, that would have been one of those like feel good moments in the sport, because there are so few of those where guys go on for a little bit longer than they should sometimes, end up getting a couple bad losses and then retiring, you know, whether or not they get a video package or anything like that. It's like, you got to just know when the right time to do it is when it comes to the retirement. I thought that would have been very, very fantastic for Jim Miller had it been him. I went back and figured out that it was, in fact, Damon Jackson who was retiring. And I was like, oh, well, all right, then that's just is what it is, I suppose. Not the way that you want to go out, but perhaps the right decision in the end.
I think what is also to note is that Jim Miller effectively just writes his own checks at this point. He gets on the mic and he's like, yeah, guys, I want to get to 50 pro wins or whatever it is. And it's like, brother, you're at 38. You just lost your last one. If you look at minimum what you're trying to get, like, brother, how many years do you think you have left? Holy shit. Like, and shout out to him for, you know, I love the attitude about it. It's just like, yeah, I'm just here to just fight. Like, I have a goal. They seem to want to let me get that goal. I'm just gonna put a belt to ass. I'm gonna try to get 50 and you guys are gonna pay me for it. And Dana, even after the show, post show, he said, yeah, if he wants to go for it, go for it. I don't care. It's like, fuck, I guess you could do whatever you want now.
Well, yeah, I mean, and this is why, like, when the term journeyman gets thrown around, I'm like, you know, a lot of people use that term in a negative way. And I'm like, I think that there's absolutely a place for the journeyman fighter. Jim Miller is sitting here proving it right now. Go out and get impressive victories, you know, finish your fights. And yeah, you do write your own check to an extent. I mean, Dana always uses him as the example of a guy who can make a long career out of fighting, because he's a dude that's always going to answer the call. He's a guy who's going to go out there, win or lose, and put his all into it, which, you know, that is the case, because I mean, for him to have gone through as much hell as he went through against Bobby Green and then come back and get another fight thereafter and win it, it's like, that is how you stick around if you're not going to be champion material, if you're not going to be ranked material, that kind of stuff. So I got no problem with it personally. I enjoyed this fight. I enjoyed, you know, seeing Jim Miller able to still be effective that way. And if he wants to take another 5, if he wants to stick around for, you know, the whatever his ultimate milestone is, as long as he can do it in a way that he's not getting wrecked, you know, in the fight, like, consistently, I'm 100% okay with it.
I think Anakin makes a great point. Keep giving him winnable fights, because, and I think, well, not because, but I think the only ones that are winnable for him, unfortunately, might be the ones where he can use his, you know, expertise in grappling. I think the last win that I saw him get was also a submission. It's like, you just got to give him people who are going to shoot on him and let him do his thing. Because the strikers, you give him an old striker like Bobby Green, and he gets torched. So imagine what a young striker would have done to him. You know, like, you just got to, favorable matchmaking is definitely what you have to do for Jim Miller if you want to get him to that milestone. And is the UFC going to be one of those sports where they just give somebody hammy opponents to get them to a goal. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I mean, Habib fought a lot of no-name people for a long time. So.
Well, outside of the UFC, of course, but yeah, no. Look, I think that this cuts both ways because we're at a time now where we get cards pretty much almost every weekend without fail. You know, I mean, like barring the end of the year where we've got that little bit of a layoff before the new year starts, we are very spoiled at this point as far as how much content we get out of the organization. So if you like that, if you enjoy watching fights pretty much every weekend, then there's got to be fights on the card where, you know, it's this type of a fight, you know, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, yeah, you don't necessarily want to have him going to be the stepping stone for the hotshot guys, the up and comers that are like really going to be like super killers. But if they continue with this level of fight for a Jim Miller, you know, and someone else in the relative range that he's in, you know, on the plus or the minus of that a little bit, either way, I again, I think it's fine. It keeps these cards filled out. It keeps us entertained, you know, depending on where your level of interest is. And, you know, we continue to have the pattern that we have now of getting events regularly. So be happy with it.
Yeah, I think that is a good point because while you're explaining that, I'm thinking to myself like if he's gonna continue and this is like a legitimate like who's better competition, then I would only feel right is if he's facing people who are like tallied to win. Like you can't just throw him and he's like minus 500 favorite. It's like okay, you're throwing the 42-year-old experienced vet against somebody who's clearly not gonna win. Like I don't know, but I mean maybe that's nobody at this point. Maybe everybody's expecting the youth to show out. So maybe that's I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the matchmakers will figure out what the right thing to do there is, and again, it can still be competitive. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to just be like, yeah, throw him every can in the book and just have him walking through people just because people like Jim Miller. I mean, that's not, you know, I mean that because if they were going to do that, then Tony Ferguson could have fought, you know, some no name, some dude out the crowd. You know what I mean? Like, you know, they want to keep the fights competitive on top of him being somewhat of a not, you know, fan favorite might be a slight stretch, but a person that the hardcore fans definitely fuck with. So, yeah, you know, I think that they'll continue to do the right thing in that regard.
Yeah, 100%.
So, good win for the Iron Man, Jim Miller. Moving on, though, we had another fight that I quite enjoyed. This was Jonathan Martinez versus Marcus McGee. What did you think of this fight, my guy?
You said you quite enjoyed this one.
I did.
I think it was a very good performance by Marcus McGee, and I think Jonathan Martinez did a whole lot of nothing until the third round. And it was actually very frustrating to watch somebody with such deadly leg kicks, and you see why later in the fight. You just watch him refuse to throw them for the first two rounds. And I want to make a point to Marcus McGee. I don't know if anybody has said this, but Marcus McGee, the way he fights, his stance is that of a salsa dancer. He has got some fluid movement. The footwork is in and out. He's switching stances. He's going with it. He's coming back. It's like it's just a perfect. It's like a violin playing. It looks really sweet. And for somebody who's you know at the age that he is in this weight class, it's really nice to see just like it's not raw athleticism that he uses to win his fights. It's just like a perfectly paced, it's just like a perfectly paced music beat going. And I really appreciate the way that he fights because, like I said, Jonathan Martinez should have came out here and blasted low kicks very early, but maybe he just wasn't able to, you know, get his timing down. Whatever you want to believe, I think he was just not doing shit. Marcus McGee had a very good performance all around. Even the third round, he showed that he was still willing to get stuff done, trying to hide the leg damage that was already done to him in a very short amount of time. And then he did end up winning, you know, the fight. So good for him.
Well, so okay, I'll explain it just a little bit on my side. So I am a fan of Marcus McGee, so I was definitely happy with the performance. Like you said, all of those things are correct. His boxing looked really sharp through the first two. The leg kicks, though, I would say were adding up for Martinez through those first two. Now I do understand that the perception of him, you know, kind of not looking like he was super locked in. But this is what I had said going into this fight: is that Marcus McGee locks in very quickly. So he got his game plan off very quickly. I think that Martinez, he did look a little off in general, so there is that element of it. But I think that when you're already somewhat off, if at least that was the perception, if you're a little bit off, and then the other guy is locking in very quickly, that does not help. You know what I mean? Like you're in a position now where it's like I'm already not really right, and this guy is really right. So he was getting some leg kicks though. They were adding up to an extent. There were a couple of them that looked like they definitely like affected him, but he didn't really show it too much. You know, the body language didn't show it too much in those first two. That third round though, yeah, the leg got rocked and he was looking pretty shaky there for a minute. It was getting slightly touch and go. And I thought it was a very good example of strategery, good strategic fighting to make it to the decision. Because I mean, under different circumstances, had he not navigated the remainder of the fight the way that he did, he easily could have gotten TKO'd off the legs. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's actually what I think everybody's so mad about. It's like you had him hobbling on one leg, where is it at? Aldo took a soul where he has negative IQ. I think the negative IQ is really what it comes down to. If you blasting one leg and he has to switch stances, why aren't you blasting the other one? Or blast the inside kick if the outside kick, like I know, okay, so you're left kicking with your left, okay, then you hobble his right leg on the outside kick. Why aren't you inside kicking the other leg? Like make him switch back. Like it's crazy to me.
well, I mean, but he was spamming the kick though after he saw that it was compromised. I mean, he was trying to go for it. Like he kept going back to it. It was just that McGee
He
was
was
able to
only
get up.
focused on the one leg though. After the point that he saw him hobbling, he's like, okay, let me start spamming it to that leg. It's like, why aren't you kicking the other leg now? It's like he's going to keep switching stances because he doesn't want you to kick him. He's evading him perfectly at that point because he knows all you want is that right kick, that low kick to his right leg. It's just crazy to me that Martinez really just stunk so bad.
Yeah, I like I said, I thought he was a little bit off. There was something just off about him in this fight. It could be the loss to Aldo kind of changed him a little bit. I mean, I think that that's a little bit of a stretch, but either way, I mean, really, we're putting all of this on Martinez when I think that Marcus McGee was just fighting super solid. I think that he looked really good in there. There was one time, I think it was in the end of the second round, where I think it was like a lunging forearm that sort of looked like it might have taken McGee a little bit off of his rhythm for just a second there. I made a note about it on the watch long. I was like, that might have affected him just a little bit, or at least shook him up momentarily. But came back in the third, locked back in, able to navigate that third round very effectively. I thought that this was a really nice win for Marcus McGee.
Yeah, I think that is also great to know is Marcus McGee really is just coming out doing what I'm not expecting him to do due to his age. And he's not the oldest dude ever, but starting out his career, he is on the older side. But maybe it's just supposed to give hope to guys like me. Maybe one day we'll get it together, man.
Exactly. Never too late. Marcus McGee out here proving that to us in real time. So I appreciate that. But good win for him, and I would suspect that now. I mean, that's a number. So, right? I mean, because that
Oh
Martinez
yeah,
was So
yeah, because he lost to Aldo. That would have been they would have been pretty close because Aldo's
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
high up.
Right. So, I mean, let's see what Marcus McGee can do. Take it as far as you want to take it, dude. I mean, with performances like this, and also that the performance plus the fight IQ. I really want to stress that aspect of it because a fighter who is going to go out there and not recognize the things that needed to be done in order to make it through that third round could have easily had a different outcome to that fight, even with Martinez fighting the way that he did in those first two. So, it's the quality of the performance plus the fight IQ. I'm a big fan of Marcus McGee. So
I
maybe
think
if Chase Parton's not going to buy the merch, perhaps I will.
yeah, his merch is definitely super good. But after a performance like this, I think it is just going to leave questions going forward. Was Martinez on his game? Was Martinez the opponent that was going to bring him problems? And were we ever going to see it? Is Marcus McGee going to have different issues with different opponents? I mean, there's a lot still to leave answered. What is his wrestling going to look like against somebody who's going to spam, take down, something like that? But it is going to show us here soon what we're going to see because he's going to get ranked and there's going to be some good opponents that we're going to see him against. Who knows?
Absolutely. Yep. Looking forward to it. All right. So, before we move on to the main card, I think we would be slightly remiss if we didn't mention the mini Trump rally that we had at the event. I don't want to get too political on this show, but it was a pretty big moment in the arena, only because in previous events where the former now president elect has been in attendance, it was really like, they would show him isolated on the walkout and have the, a little bit of an acknowledgement of it. But this was a whole package, man. I mean, up on the screen and very, big fanfare going on and everything. So, an interesting thing to acknowledge is this intersection of politics and sport here. Obviously, Dana White, very close to Donald Trump, and yeah, a lot of fighters
Elon
acknowledging
Musk
Elon Musk
and
as well.
Kid
Yeah.
Rock was there too, guys. Don't forget the main attraction. I actually find it crazy that, since you want to bring this up, I find it crazy that, like, growing up, my dad would always listen to fucking Kid Rock or whatever, and now I'm watching the UFC and it's like Kid Rock is walking out with Donald Trump, the president of the United States. Like, where have we lost some stuff here? Like, Kid Rock is just here. Like, so it's fun to see him always.
Yeah, yeah. And just very interesting times that we're living in, where we have this intersection of entertainment, whether it's sports or otherwise, because obviously also Aiden Ross was in attendance. Aiden Ross is somebody who had gotten, I believe, thanked by Dana during the victory speech that he had made on election night. So we've just got a very interesting political landscape now, where entertainment and politics are meshing, even in a way that it hasn't before. Just an interesting evolution, I would say.
It's funny you bring up the Aiden Ross thing, saying he thanked him at the presidential whatever. I didn't know that, but it does kind of make a little more sense, because at the post-fight speech, Dana had a whole fucking thing about Trump or whatever, because they brought up some question about how does he feel that Donald Trump was attending. He's like, guys, I want you to know that this election was won on the internet. The internet is what won this election. So he like went on a whole big rant. So, like, thinking of like the Aiden Ross thing, it's kind
No,
of,
he
yeah,
is absolutely 10,000% correct, in my opinion. I mean, again, I don't want to go into a whole long political
yeah.
diatribe here or anything, but I did think that that was one of the stronger parts of the Trump candidacy, was the recognition of where culture is moving. And it really is a lot online. The old guard of entertainment is kind of not necessarily being phased out, but it's evolving as well. And the harnessing of the new crop of entertainment properties and entities is what he did very effectively. The UFC and fighting is certainly bigger than it's ever been. And to be able to tap into that, in addition to the Aiden Rosses of the world, you're seeing the results of it in a real way here. So again, just an interesting little piece of information, because it was so front and center on this broadcast. I thought we should probably at least touch on it.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, that aside, let's move back on into fights with Mauricio Hufi versus James Yontop, or Mauricio Rufi versus James Lontop, depending on where in the world you are, or how you want to pronounce those names. Either way, I'll go with Rufi and Yontop for this one. Yontop in on short notice, could not make weight. Okay, so yeah, this is definitely, you were correct about this one as far as the weight issue is concerned. Yontop, short notice, couldn't make weight, catch weight fight at 165, and missed the catch weight limit as well. So a weight miss and then a weight miss as well. And you could definitely tell in this fight, because he looked a hell of a lot bigger than Mauricio Hufi.
Yeah, DC explained it well. He missed it by almost 20 pounds. Like, if you switch it from 55 and you go up to 65 and then you miss it by 8, it's like, brother, like, you didn't even fucking try. But it was short notice, so whatever you want to say. But James Top, whatever you want to say, he has always looked like shit in every one of his fights. He's never been in shape. So he's just one of these dudes that, as you see, is wanting to fight, will take short notice fights. And like I brought up with the other fight earlier, it's like you gotta make a reputation of taking all these short notice fights. You don't just do it once and get in and then you're good. It's like, this is how you get contract bumps. This is how you get on pay-per-view slots, is by taking fights that nobody's gonna, because it's short notice or whatever. James, whether or not you've made weight, is like, you still did show up and you put on a performance that people are going to remember. They remember a slob that came in and fought all the way to the third round and almost came back. But I think this is just to the point that Mauricio Hufi is the fighting nerd that left a lot of questions because we haven't seen him as much. And I think perfectly depicted by me, he was getting a little too creative for his own good. And he could have finished this fight if he wasn't being a jackass. That wasn't very fighting nerd esque. That was fighting. I'm going to be stupid at times. Um, so James, damn, I keep doing it. James, excuse me. I'm trying to be respectful.
And we know what you're
James,
talking about.
I think you did get your ass beat for a little bit, just what we expected. But the fact that you came back at the end with all this rejuvenated energy because you missed weight by 1,000,000 pounds, you made some fans at the end of the day. And Hoofy showed out, but like I said, kind of still leaving some questions about what we're going to see, even though he's the only fighting nerd that has been on a pay-per-view. Two of them, count them. So
Yeah. Well, I will say that we talked about the weight issue there. You can decide how much that played into it, but regardless, one way or another, this was the best version of Hamas Yontop that we've seen in the organization. Uh, he definitely was coming out there to be game, and I give him some credit for that because really going into this, we both of us were saying that we thought that this was going to be a cakewalk essentially for Hoofy. So it wasn't, so at least it was competitive in that regard. He did look a lot bigger. Mauricio was having a little bit of an uphill battle in that element of this fight, and I agree. The bag of tricks was definitely on display. Hoofy got a little bit wild as expected and, kind of paid the price at certain times for it. Nothing that he couldn't overcome. But if he had been a little bit more grounded, the makeup of this fight could have been a little bit different. But overall, still a pretty good performance at the end of the day. Yontop kept it competitive all the way through. Um, I thought that this was a pretty okay fight overall. Unanimous decision win for Hoofy was fine as well.
it was fine. I honestly just want to make the point to James. It's like there is no reason this is your third UFC fight. You came in onto Contender Series that you look like this coming off the couch. Like you are a professional fighter. There is no fucking reason for you. Like if you're planning to fight at lightweight, or if that's what you're willing to step up on short notice, like you got to at least look like you can maybe make it. Like brother, with that belly, with that stuff that you got going on there, it's like you're never gonna be in shape. You don't get fight ready the week of. Like you got to stay fight ready. So Hamas coming in on a three fight losing streak. All of them might be short notice fights, to be honest with you. I know two of them maybe. The Borishev one might also have been a short notice, but losing three in a row is not looking good. Even though you're getting good, you're keeping good standing with the boss man because you're willing to take whatever fights that he gets. But like you got to start winning them. I know that's the second layer to it. Like there's great, and then there's just like above average, and then there's good. But you got to be on the great side. You got to win those fights that you just step up to.
Sure. Absolutely. And I think that this is a good question, and I'll let you get your answer in here as well, Chase. But do you think that Hoofy was overconfident? My answer to that would be no, I don't think that he was overconfident. What I think was the issue is that that he's still getting his full on understanding is not the right word, but I think that he's still finding the rhythm and timing of using the more creative elements of his game effectively against higher level competition. Not that Yontop was necessarily like the highest of the high, but just in the big show in general. I think that he practices and drills a lot of creative strikes and maneuvers, and when you actually put that into effect in the fight proper, the dynamics are always going to be different as opposed to what you get in the gym. So I think that he just needs to draw back a little bit from the over creativeness. You know what I mean? There is such a thing as getting a little bit too creative in there. And I think that that would be the recommendation, but I don't think it was an overconfidence in it. I think it was just he's naturally one of those guys that wants to use unorthodox strikes, and when you do that, you just have to be really well placed with them, and you're not always going to get them, even if you are doing everything correct. So,
I think looking at it as an overconfidence thing is not something that, like, I think a lot of people might feel that way. You know, you have a fighting nerd that comes in, he's on 2 pay-per-views. His debut was on a pay-per-view. Comes in at another one, and he's just here to get the crowd hype. He's here for these flashy movements. That's all he practices, you know, quote unquote. All he does and all he wants to pursue in these fights is just that big pop from the crowd. It's like there's got to be a point at all times that the creativeness is going to meet execution. If not, you're spinning yourself out your shoes, and you're just looking. You're taking the aura away. Like right now, you're Brazilian McGregor, but eventually people are going to be using that as a meme. It's like, here goes Brazilian McGregor again, and then it's him doing fucking bullshit. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that all of that really does track in, based on what we saw in there. So,
Actually,
yeah,
before
sure, yeah.
I think Michelle Pajeda is a great example of that. At one point, I'm sure people were thinking, look at this creative guy. He can do all this creative stuff. And it's like, but then you watch him do it every single fight, and every single fight can't be that creative finisher. So I think we're going to start seeing leaning maybe more towards that than McGregor thing, because McGregor wasn't fucking like the flashiest fucking dude ever. Like, he started out throwing a bunch of spin kicks and stuff, but like Hoofy isn't doing that level of creativeness where it's like fucking spinning body kicks, or you know, spinning fucking wheel kicks and shit like that. He's more the boxing type of fucking creative. Or I don't know. I just don't see the same thing. I do, but I don't.
No, yeah, I don't think that the comparison is like, because like you hear that all over the place. Actually, shout out to Checkmate MMA when we were on when I was on their show. One of the co-hosts on there was saying making that comparison. They made it on the commentary, and I really think it's mostly coming from the stance more than anything else. I mean, you know, the movement and the stance definitely are reminiscent, but as far as the actual, like, again, the bag of tricks, quote unquote, I think that there's a pretty wide gap based on what I've seen, that kind of makes them differentiatable. I mean, like, you know, you can see the differences pretty clearly if you watch movement by movement. So
Well,
yeah,
one person can finish somebody in fucking 13 seconds,
and
you know?
right, and there you go, and you're exactly right. And actually, the Michelle Pajeda comparison, I think, was a really good one, because in Michelle Pajeda's last fight, we saw a guy who was not going to let all of that happen, and then we saw what happened on the other side of that. So Hoofy just needs to be very careful that he doesn't get himself caught doing, you know, some crazy stuff that's going to put him in a bad spot. And then also he needs to be able to keep the cardio up if he's going to be doing explosive motions as well.
That's exactly the point I was going to make. When you said, you know, look back at Michelle, it's like the same thing will probably happen. He's going to do all this explosive shit in the first 2-3 rounds, but you already saw Hoofy in the third round after he did all that goofy shit, and he looked pretty fucked up. Like gas tank was gone. He hands down, not really much left to offer. James was actually teeing off on him at a point. Like the defense was like completely gone too with the gas tank. So it is something to note that if he gets somebody who not only is going to wrestle, because we still haven't seen him. The second UFC fight, he's against 2 strikers, and one of them was Jamie Malarkey, who's a punching bag, not a striker. James Top, honestly, same fucking deal. But if he gets put up with a striker and he's going to get wrestled, that third round is going to be really rough for him, let alone 2 additional ones. Like Hoofy, again, I think there's a lot to be desired, and I think we see the potential. Like, oh, Brazilian McGregor, he's on pay-per-view, like he's got these fancy strikes, but I don't see I'm not seeing the full package yet. So we gotta hope the nerds, they can keep molding and crafting, because this seems like the golden child of them right now. Like Jean Silva and Caio, like they come out here and they can finish people, and they can go 5 rounds. Well, John Silva, not 5 rounds, but Caio can go 5 rounds, striking his ass off until the bell. John Silva can just finish anybody at any weight class around him. It's like Hoofy, we're still waiting to see what the full thing is here.
For sure. And I think that it is great that you concluded with that, because one other note that I have in the notes is that Joe Rogan on commentary about Mauricio said, in my opinion, this guy is the star of the camp, talking about the fighting nerds. And I was like, lol, sorry,
Yeah.
Caio and Gene.
The dudes that have been active and fucking crushing it. Yeah, I know.
It's just a little funny.
Caio 100% is the fucking leader of the fighting nerds. Like
come on.
It doesn't. He's anyway. It's just funny to know. Sorry, that made
right. Well, and that exactly. It was just a funny little way to cap it off. But you know, at the end of the day, it was it was a win, and against a guy who A win is a win, and against a guy who was a significantly larger weight, and you could tell it in the size on all metrics, really. I mean, so that there's something to be said for that as well. It's not, it's one thing to get a solid win in a competitive fight over a guy who's dead even on you, but this was a little bit more of an uphill battle, and he was able to overcome that. So good for Mr. Hoofy and good for the fighting nerds.
100%.
All right, moving on to Viviane Araújo versus Karine Silva. What did you think about this one, Chase?
I think the promotion doesn't do itself any favors when they consistently hear about women's mixed martial arts, and then they put fights like these on the main card. That up until the fights, we're questioning why is this like this is between Bo Nickel and Hoofy underneath Charles Oliveira and John Jones. It's like, who asked for this and why do you guys want this here? And then we watch it and it's just like just an average women's MMA fight. Like I really do love women's MMA, but like if they're going to be on the main card right between the prime time people that I'm going to be paying $80 for, it better be a damn good fight between two people. Listen, we'll talk about Jake and Tyson promotion earlier, but those two women in that could have been on the main card. I would have loved to see something like that. This just wasn't that. This was just two Brazilian women just fighting, striking with each other.
Let me counter that, because we did say, in the look ahead on last week, that this was like, we didn't really have too much of a strong opinion about this. But looking into the records a little bit more, what I think that the thought process here was that Karine Silva was on a 9-fight win streak, with 8 of those being finishes. So what I think the organization was trying to do was have this be the big coming out party for Karine Silva. She goes out on a big stage, gets a really solid finish over, a decent enough name in Araújo. That puts her into the conversation, especially on a card like this where she is amongst so many big names. They're trying to build up what could be a future star in her. Unfortunately, based on what we saw, that is not the case there. This is another one where there are levels, and the more veteran fighter in Araújo was able to navigate. However, watching this one, and again, we can go back. Obviously, the Oban Elliott fight, everybody had a different opinion than I did. But watching this one, I mean, I thought that Silva, like, in my opinion, I would have given her the first 2 rounds personally. I was a little bit shocked by this decision, but it wasn't such a blatant, black and white robbery that I'd make any kind of like stink about it. But it was just a little bit strange to me based on what I had saw. So I don't know.
Yeah, this one, I mean, it was basically the same thing as the Moira fight. It's like I saw somebody who is coming off a big win streak, and they're not looking like somebody who was even on a 1-fight win streak. It's like they didn't look as impressive as I was hoping that somebody at this point in the fight card was going to be. Like I feel like it's kind of derailing the momentum when we see James fight all the way to the bell, putting his heart into it, and then I watch Karine Silva, and this is supposed to be a killer right now, and she just didn't really impress me. So.
Well, I mean, okay. I thought that she was doing pretty well up until she gassed out tremendously. I mean, that was really the big story of this one from my perspective, was that first round was kind of a little bit of a feel out until the very, very end when Silva landed a couple of decent shots. So I think that was, in my opinion, enough to swing that round because it was such an inactive round. But still, again, not the shot out of a cannon start that you want at this high up on a card. I understand that aspect of it, but from at least the judging of it, in my opinion, those shots at the end of that round were enough to swing that in her favor. The second round, though, I will say that I was decently impressed with Silva because she was laying on some decent shots. Araújo got her down, but she ended up evading the arm bar, which I thought was pretty solid on her part. And then she almost had the Darce herself there. So I was like, okay, not only was she able to do some really nice scrambling to get out of the armbar situation, but she ended up turning it into a submission attempt of her own. I was pretty okay with all of that. I thought that was decent. Again, based on what we were theoretically being promised and what we got, I can understand the analysis. I can understand the assessment, but that would be at least my reasoning for thinking that this was not a terrible fight and that she should have probably won the fight, in my opinion, because that third round, yes, she did gas extremely. This was another example that might have been almost as bad as Mike Malott gassing out against Neil Magny. That was really one of the craziest ones that I've ever seen, of a guy who was solidly up 2 rounds and then completely shitting the bed. This, I think, is definitely smacks of that. Her laying on her back multiple times in the middle of the cage was really a bad look. And I think that actually might have been partially why she ended up losing this fight, was because the optics just were terrible for her in that third round. So if anybody gave her that second round, it was going to, or I mean, if anybody gave Araujo either of those other 2 rounds, then that third round certainly sealed the deal for it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I don't, like you said, she gassed out, but I think even before that, I was not seeing a world beater.
Yeah, no, I think that is an accurate assessment as well. And again, levels to the game. I mean, she is still younger, and still, somebody who is they're trying to bump up, or we're trying to bump up in this fight. And Araujo's been around for a while; she's seen a lot, so able to navigate a fight a little bit better. And she
I,
didn't. In that assessment, last note on this was that in the second round, that I did say that I thought Silva looked really good. Araujo did still end up on top at the end of that round, so nice optically there on that side of it.
I, I think, we see people and, women, whatever you want to say, but it's like they've lost early on in their career at other promotions. Then when they get here and they're on some crazy win streak, and then they get to some mid opponent like Aruja is not really, like, again, this isn't some great opponent, but once you meet a certain, like you said, there's just levels to it. It's just you could see it coming, but hindsight is 2020.
Fair, yeah. So I mean, really, that's about it for this fight. I mean, it was what it was in all of the regards that we just said, and decent win for Araujo, continuing to keep herself going. That's really all I got for it.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, a fight that was certainly has some more things to talk about, but not in a great way. Bo Nickel versus Paul Craig. What the fuck was this?
Yeah, this was one. I think there's not really much to say during the fight, I think, because not much fucking happened except Bo Nickel spamming or overhand right. That was 100% all he knows how to do. He didn't shoot for a takedown at all, which I find was funny. Like, I know he was trying to prove a point. Like, I don't need to shoot on Paul Craig. But, like, brother, you probably should have, because I did not want to see you strike anymore. And then the fact that you get on the fucking mic and talk about you fucking dominated. This was a dominant performance. I know you guys want to see finishes. I know you guys want to see me choke everybody out. It's like, brother, if you know that's what we want, how about you attempt to do it? You didn't even attempt to strangle him. If that's what you're going to say we want to see, and you just can't do it to everybody, how about you try? Because after the fact, also Dana in the post show, they asked him about Bo Nickel and his performance, and Dana gave like the ha ha ha, he's gonna have to do more in this promotion if he's gonna want to be a big name guy, but he's got some goals and this and that, and it's like Dana's letting us know, like, if he doesn't start not getting booed by the American crowd, then he's gonna stop fucking seeing these main card spots. I'm thinking, because that was just not good at all. And Bo Nickel, also to this point, he's got too many yes men around him. He got on there after the fucking, there's a TikTok video of him, whatever, and he's talking about how everybody that that an opinion matters to him, he asked them about the fight, and they're like, yeah, man, you fucking did it. You got that shit done great. Like, you dominated. It's like, well, you're clearly not talking to the right people, because not one person, if everybody in the crowd is booing you, and this is the home crowd, whatever you want to say, there's something wrong, Bo. They're literally saying overrated to Bo Nickel in Madison Square Garden with the president there while he's watching. You think that's a good look? I don't care what you say in the post-fight speech about what we wanted to see. I don't care what we saw in the cage. The optics. The president is hearing overrated. He doesn't understand the sport, but he's understanding that the crowd doesn't fucking like Bo Nickel. Even with your little golf swing fucking celebrate. What are you celebrating for? Did you not get, like, did you finish the fight? Who has a celebration emote after a fucking decision? Like, I actually am thinking about that now. Do people really go on? I mean, other than the hands up, you know, do they really emote after they get a fucking decision victory
I mean,
before they win?
certainly not in a decision that looked like this. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so I mean, I think that I asked what the fuck was this fight. Well, I think that the answer, at least in my interpretation of it, was that both guys had the same basic game plan. I'm not going to the ground because the other guy is a good wrestler, and on the feet, I'm going to counter strike. I want to try to catch him coming in. Thus, because both of them were basically doing the same thing, no one threw anything. And they basically danced in front of each other for 3 rounds, which was a very goofball display. Paul Craig barely threw a kick, even though he was the longer guy and at range the entire time. I was like, bro, you should be spamming these kicks. You're talking about Bo spamming the overhand. I'm like, where are these kicks from Paul Craig? He's not. He's sitting there getting pissed off about Bo not engaging. I'm like, Paul Craig, why were you not engaging? I mean, like, this is a two-way street. He's in here, all pouty faced, trying to egg him on. It's like, bro, you're in this fight just as much as he is. So, like, I thought on both sides. I mean, again, a lot of the spotlight is going to be on Bo Nickel because of all the stuff that you were saying. He's essentially a hotshot guy. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about him already. So he's sort of the focal point of it. But it's a two-way street in this fight. Both these guys having a similar game plan just made this thing, again, very much of a goofy display. At one point during the watch along, Vitz King ended up falling asleep. It was during this fight. I thought that was kind of an understandable decision. And for him to say that he was whipping Paul Craig's ass, Bo Nickel, for 3 rounds, yeah, that is a laugh out loud moment for sure. So overall, it was, it was just a bizarre display to watch. I think was really what it was. Like, if you go back on the watch along, like, since I am just doing it by myself, I'm pretty much just laughing through most of it. I'm like, what is happening right now? This is a very weird interpretive dance situation we've got going on, where it almost looked like the beginning of the Kung Fu movie. I think I've made that comparison before on the show, but like, both guys just sort of like, where's my opening? When's it my time to go? It's like, we're one-on-one right now, guys. Like, one of you guys can take lead here. Nobody wanted to lead the dance.
There was a moment where Bo Nickel stood there in his stance and just like Paul Craig like danced around him and he just like waited for him, like little jokingly stuff, things that you would do if you're like convincingly up, or if you're Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson. Like, this is almost what I was watching, is just two dudes that just did not know what the fuck was going on in this cage, like just doing stupid shit, yelling at each other. Like, Paul Craig is just yelling in his Scottish accent. And Bo Nickel's just like, again, standing at 6 feet apart. Like, this was coronavirus shit going on here. This was bad.
Fair. And yeah, and I do, Toby's making a good point here, saying that if he didn't say shit like I'd sleep Hamzat and Whitaker, we'd be saying another decent decision win from a decent prospect. I don't think so. I mean, like, I think that may be a little bit of a stretch because this was just so ineffective of a fight. I mean, like, there really was not any major engagement. That's a big point of all of this, is that it's not even that he wasn't like doing what he needed to do to win under the circumstances. Yeah, he kind of did do that, but this still wouldn't have been a decent win regardless of all that other stuff. That other stuff certainly does not help.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, I guess that's about all that I got to say about it at this point in time. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what level they want to put Bo Nickel at next time now, based on this, because a lot of people were saying that this was a fraud check even in victory.
I think Bo Nickel, which is unfortunate, I brought it up. He's got too many yes men around him. People are not giving him the advice that he needs to be as successful as he wants to be in this sport. Like, for what he's doing right now, sure, you could be the middle of the road guy all you want. But like we said, if he wants to say that he's going to beat Hamzat, brother, you would have got strangled. Like, you would have got murdered in this cage tonight. If this is what Bo Nickel showed up to Hamzat, like 3 fights ago, like Hamza, like 4, like in 2020 or whatever it was, whenever he was making his runs, probably would have killed this dude.
Well, let me play devil's advocate though, because Hamzat, would have rushed him. And there is potential there that if Paul Craig had rushed him, that we would have seen the defensive going into offensive wrestling that Bo Nickel is proficient at. So, is there at least any case, again, this is a devil's advocate statement, but is there any case to be made that he could have utilized the offense coming at him to his advantage in either situation.
Now, I think if Bo and Hamzat got into the fight, I think Bo would expect what he expected out of Paul Craig. Like, oh, he doesn't want to wrestle with me because he knows I'm a fucking All American. Hamzat's not going to give a shit. And he's going to wrestle Bo Nickel and rush him off the feet. And Bo Nickel's not going to have a chance to, like, he's going to sit there ready to strike and then realize Hamzat's on his legs. I, I unfortunately had a lot of faith for Bo Nickel, but it is just glaring that Cody Brundage was able to hold you off for a little bit. So there, and Paul Craig on the feet was able to make you look like shit. And it's not like he looked good. It's just you looked bad. You couldn't make him look terrible. So that's really the point that I have to make is the striking is not evolving to where we need it to be. The wrestling, it can be as good as you want. If you're going to fight like this, it doesn't matter.
Fair points. I mean, but to that point, at least, the one thing that I did think that Bo Nickel said in his post fight that did track a little bit, made a little bit of sense, is this is only his seventh pro fight. He's only been striking for a few years, if that, at this point. So there is potential for that to evolve with the game, still even more so over time. But the time is absolutely now. Like this is as I said, I mean, I think that a lot of people look at this as a fraud check. Like you need to recognize that. And as Chase was saying, if there are people around you that are yesing you to death with what you're doing currently, then that needs to change as well. Like you need to recognize that there are elements of your game that are not going to fly. Him talking about, basically comparing himself to an extent to the likes of Habib and Mighty Mouse and all those other great fighters that he had mentioned in there was like, bro, you're talking out of pocket right now based on what we saw. You need to catch up with yourself is what needs to happen now. So next, it's going to be very interesting to see what the next fight is and what he's going to have to do and what adjustments are going to be made, because the adjustments need to be made now if he's going to be continuing to up the ranks. I mean, like, they're obviously like, because people were saying that he was being hot shotted already, and I was like, I don't think that it's like the same type of hot shotting that we saw with like a Raul Rosas or like a Sean O'Malley or any of those kind of guys. Like it's a different type of deal because of the elements that are specific to Bo being the wrestler turned MMA practitioner. So it's a little bit different, but now you're up in the big boys league now, dude. I mean, this really was the time to shine, to show that you could hang. And if you can't hang 100%, you need to start now. Now is the time to fix these problems.
It's a great point because it's unfortunate with this sport. It's like I'm trying to think of the better way to put it. It's like it's a make or miss, type of. So Bo Nickel, he can sit here and have the excuse of it's only my seventh fight. I haven't been doing this for that long. Brother, it's going to catch up to you if you don't figure out how to change that. Not necessarily say like, oh, go through a whole camp that's going to change the way you fucking fight. It's like, brother, you're just going to have to make shit happen when it comes to you. Not everybody is in the perfect position, has everything in their bag, and they've been training, since day one, and that they've had the perfect amount of time to perfect their craft. It's like, no, people just go out there and you just got to figure it out. That's where greatness happens, is in those little moments when those decisions get made in the cage and you decide to stand with Paul Craig for 15 of those minutes. That's exactly where you're going to have to decide to be better. And if you're not going to take those chances and, rush in and like, oh, maybe I can get Paul Craig down and get his back. He's already tired. It's the third round. Like anything like that. If you're not having those decisions and trying new things, if you're just willing to skate to decision, then I mean, like, brother, you can have the excuses, but it's just not going to fucking play out. You've already talked your shit. Now, when you lose, we're coming for you on that Hamzat Rod Whitaker shit. Where's the chimp? Get the chimp out. And if you think you can beat him after Paul Craig took you to decision, I would love to see it now, Bo Nickel.
All right. I mean, well said. And I think that that's pretty much all to be said on this one. So, I mean, a victory for Bo Nickel at the end of the day, but a lot of question marks going forward for him. Well, moving on to the co-main event of the evening here, less question marks for Charles Oliveira, who was fighting Michael Chandler. What did you think of this display?
I think the first thing that I want to note is that you see fights and you see, okay, so take Usman and Leon and take Volk and Max Holloway. All three of the fights they played out differently. I think if you put Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler in the cage 6 more times, every single engagement sequence that you saw in the first 2 fights, like they're going to happen again. Like this is one of the fights that is just going to be the same thing every single time. I thought it was very funny that in the first round, it was the exact same sequence. Michael Chandler gets rocked. He steps back, trips on the cage, tries to run away. Chandler, Oliveira's chasing him down with hooks. And it's like, it was the same exact fight, just over a longer period of time. And that was exactly what the crowd needed, not going to lie. We needed this 5 rounds of Michael Chandler being a goofball, just so we could realize, like, man, him and McGregor might be really fucking fun to watch. Like, it might be, because this dude really just don't give a shit. He's just a fucking goofball. That's the only thing I can call him, other than a cheater, of course, because
Yeah, well, we can talk about that for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of times I talk about there being like themes to cards and like trends in the cards themselves. This was a fight that had themes within it, at least for the first 4 rounds of a 5 round fight. It was like variations on the same theme, a little bit of striking, mostly from Oliveira. And then Mike gets taken down and Charles nearly subs him. Like that was essentially variations of that for 4 rounds. First round wasn't close to the sub. Middle 3 were much closer. And then finally in the 5th, I mean, for Mike to be able to come back after all of the punishment that he was taking and nearly being finished as many times as he did, it was certainly entertaining. As what I had said coming into this fight, I think rang very true, that, you know, the version of Michael Chandler that we have now is really just a caution to the wind kind of guy, and Charles Oliveira is not. So he's going to end up in these situations that you saw in this fight just by necessity, because it is the way that he is choosing to fight. Um, so it was entertaining for sure to be able to see him come back in that round, stun Oliveira a little bit there. It made it very interesting throughout 5 rounds of a kind of a crazy fight in that regard. But the glaring issue here was absolutely the all of the dirtiness. I mean, it's I've always been a little bit resistant to it, because I'm like, because he's so bull in a china shop. He's one of these guys that's very wild in there, that it's going to be naturally things that just sort of happened throughout the motion of the fight. So I've kind of like given him a little bit more leeway. Got to stop that at this point. Like when all of those back of the head shots were landing. I mean, and fucking Keith Peterson standing there watching it. That's the thing. On the watch along, I'm sitting there. Vitz King was awake for this one. I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm like, you know, I'm seeing these shots, and I'm like, those do look kind of close, but they have to be on the side of the head. And I'm like, those shots are you know, those look like clean shots. And he's like, no, those are back of the head shots, man. I'm like, no, Keith Peterson is standing directly over it, watching it. Those couldn't be clean, couldn't be dirty shots. And then you saw the replay, and I was like, no, those absolutely were back of the head shots. And Keith Peterson was just standing there taking it in like he's watching it on TV. So very crazy in that regard.
Yeah, I think it is important to note that Michael Chandler held onto the top of the cage to do a backflip in the first round. Throughout the entire fight, he was grabbing the inside of the glove a plethora of times, grabbing the cage a plethora of times. Then, yes, in the 5th round, he does throw it's funny that you're sitting there and you could have a whole discussion with Vitz and like, is that back of the head? No way. It might be. And like, it's still going on. Keith Peterson is literally fucking analyzing it like from 2 centimeters away. Yep. And we're watching like 45 seconds of clubbing blows to the back of the head. Like, it was kind of nuts. Like, I'm screaming like what is happening? Like, oh my goodness. And Michael Chandler didn't give a shit. He doesn't give a fuck. Listen, he's a fighter at heart, and I really appreciate that he's willing to bend the rules to a certain extent to try to win. But yeah, he just don't give a fuck. And I thought it was funny that slowly throughout the fight, so the first round started, second round began, and Michael Chandler, you're like noticing like, okay, he's a little more tempered. He's not going out there and just throwing it all at once. And then third, fourth round came, and you're like, oh, there he is again. He's just throwing anything he has. Like, it doesn't even matter. I think DC and Rogan might have made like the point. It's like he can't help himself. Like, he cannot help himself from just being balls to the wall. And at the end, you know, with him jumping with Oliveira on the back, probably one of the craziest feats of strength that we've seen in the fucking cage, to stand up with another human on your back. and then get back up and do it again while the person is like locking your legs, like you can't really bend, um, crazy. And then it was just like a buildup of Michael Chandler just again not giving a shit, just do whatever the fuck takes. Like I don't care. The crowd loves it. I don't care. He there was a tweet and it was like he thought he was in a movie at this point. It's like he probably did, man. That crowd really did love that shit. I kind of did too.
Yeah, yeah, certainly entertaining to watch. And he might not give a fuck, but that does not mean that the officiating staff should not give a fuck. That was really something. I mean, Keith Peterson has had a couple of questionable ones over the years. I mean, he's starting to rack up a couple more. That one was pretty goddamn blatant. I mean, there was it
He
was
had money for sure. He had money on Chandler.
either that or beer and cigarettes in the system. But I remember during Ian Gary and Neil Magny, I think it was that fight, that there was a time when one of the two of them, I think it was Ian Gary, had his hand over the top of the cage for an extended period of time to the point where because what made me think of that was when you said I was having the entire conversation with Vitz King. It was that situation as well, where I'm like sitting there, like it made me question if I knew what the rules were because we're sitting there watching it for so long. It's like, are you going to say anything about this? This was absolutely echoing of that. Like Keith Peterson is starting to really rack up a couple of bad looks in the cage as far as officiating goes. So, I mean, I know how insanely difficult of a job and how thankless of a job it is to be a referee like that. I don't take any of those elements away. However, you got to be able to do your fucking job. And I don't care how loud the crowd is, and I don't care what the elements of the fights are. Like that, if you are seeing blatantly illegal shots, there were people that were calling for the disqualification. I'm like, well, I mean, if you let 10 of them happen in a row, 10 plus, however many it actually ended up being, then yeah, I guess you could, but like you should stop that before it starts. I mean, I don't even remember him even warning about it. It might have just been too loud, but regardless, it was just a very bad look from the officiating side when it came to that. Other than that, when it came to the fight, certainly entertaining and made it very hilarious that Michael Chandler had the fucking stones to continue to call out Connor thereafter in his post-fight interview.
That's what I was going to bring up next. Is like I think it is very impressive, and I think it does show that Michael Chandler is not just another person calling out Conor McGregor. He actually was able to secure a date with Conor McGregor. It didn't come to fruition, but it it very well may. A second Conor call out is pretty insane work, but we all kind of knew it was coming. Like after that, it was kind of funny. Like we were all like sitting there, like he's gonna fucking call out McGregor again, isn't he? And he did it, and it was fun. I think Michael Chandler knows how to captivate a crowd. I think that's really what it comes down to. He can lose as many as you want, but people are gonna want to watch him lose.
For sure. And that was the same basic point that I had for that as well. Is it's like, what did you expect him to do, or what was he supposed to do at that point? I mean, he literally gave over a year, if not 2 years, pushing 2 years of his life waiting for that fight. To come back into a fight like this, show that he's still entertaining, but lose. I mean, all of the elements were there for him to do that. He's been chasing it. He's been wanting it. To throw it away at that point would have been not it would have been out of character, and it wouldn't have been the right thing to do, all things considered. So I'm not even really mad at it, but it is still crazy work for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely a good win by Charles, though. I really appreciate that he did come out and convincingly win. No questions left unanswered. Again, like I said, this fight would have played out the same way if you did it 100 times, which is unfortunate to say because Charles should be subbing Michael Chandler. I don't know why Dustin Poirier can, but Charles can be on his back for a lifetime and never get it. It doesn't add up.
Well, and I did want to ask you now then, based on that and everything that we saw here, because the conversation, at least on commentary, was that, oh, this should be the conversation about Oliveira getting another shot. And I'm like, well, he did get the win, of course, but he wasn't able to submit Arman. I mean, not able to submit Michael Chandler either. Couldn't knock out either of those guys. Where does this now place him in reality? You know what I mean? Like, I think that the landscape is evolving. He's certainly keeping himself in that conversation, but I don't know if it's warranting him jumping the line in any significant way.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate to bring up the facts that the last two people that he beat, one being Michael Chandler off 2 years layoff, the other being Dariush, who is ancient. So, like, you again, favorable matchups in this sport, they happen very often, especially towards the top sometimes. And maybe we'll see Charles versus Dan Hooker or something, but before we see one of them fight for the belt again. Um, I don't know. I really don't know. It is very interesting. Didn't one of them call out for the BMF? Was it Michael Chandler?
Michael
Maybe.
Chandler did, yeah.
Okay, so maybe something's available. Like Max Holloway versus Michael Chandler. That might be kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be mad at that necessarily. Yeah, again, for the BMF, like people are talking about the merits of keeping the BMF around now after the Ilya fight, even though it wasn't up for grabs in that fight. They're just the dynamics changed a little bit for Max because of that. But the whole idea of the BMF belt is to have exactly that type of fight, to have balls to the wall, all action, all gas, no brakes kind of shit. So yeah, Michael Chandler going for BMF doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I once I said Hooker and Charles. I think that might be a good play next because that should be a good a good 5 round test for Oliveira. This was obviously a decent showing for him. Like I think this is actually the first time he's been outside 3, by the way.
Yes,
Um,
that this is his first time going to fifth round. Yeah,
so
or yeah,
this was
going past 3. You're correct.
so this was a good performance, although it was very one-sided. I think Dan Hooker might be able to put up a more stylistic matchup that would lend for a more exhilarating 5 rounds if it makes it there. Um, and I think that would be nice next, especially since Arman and Islam are definitely going for the belt. But
Sure. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we will wait and see. Um,
and facts to Rick Allen, it is a step back for Dan Hooker, but or not Dan Hooker, but for Charles Oliveira, it is a step back to fight Dan Hooker. But like I said, the belt it's already occupied for Arman and Islam, and they don't even know when that's going to happen yet. People are saying sometime early next year, but we don't fucking know. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of shakeups still need to happen. Fights are in the way. But a fight that didn't really shake up too much in the grand scheme of things. Why did it even really happen was the general consensus that I had been seeing from a number of sources, but we got to talk about it. It is the main event of the evening, John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. This was so dumb.
it, yeah, it was kind of heartbreaking. Um, just watch it because for context, the night before, all of the world was watching a 60-year-old man get beat up.
And we'll talk about that for sure.
And then we get to this fight, and you see that the difference between a 40-year-old and a 60-year-old, well, they both got beat up very good. And I don't know, Stipe just, like I said, I didn't see. I'm trying to make the comparison that into words. It's like, from 60, right? He looked a certain way. And then you have 40 that's just a few years out from the sport, and he looked a certain way. I don't know, man. Stipe, shout out to you for having a lot of heart, but you took an ass beating really, really quick into this fight. And John Jones, I mean, he's the GOAT. I mean, that's really what it is.
Yeah, I certainly said it on the watch along that you cannot deny the skill of John Jones. That you can talk about a million other things with John. The skill you cannot deny, of course. To break it down just a little bit, I mean, it was pretty well one-sided for most of it. I think that Stipe came back slightly in the second round. First round was all John. I mean, Stipe got tripped so easily.
That was ridiculous.
was like, oh
I want to
god.
cut you off and talk about that
Sure,
because
yeah,
you
yeah.
brought it up. That trip, like, it made me see that, like, John Jones is the prime example of age, athleticism. Maybe it's not there, but the technique will always be there. If he can flip a dude who's 30 pounds heavier than him just on a whim, just like with a leg sweep, it's like he knows what he's just in tune with every little intricacy that he's doing. So
Yep.
continue.
Absolutely. Another person that locks into the flow state very early and effectively, for sure, John Jones. But so, yeah, gets taken down super easily, Stipe does. And then elbows for 3 excruciating minutes. Good Lord, was that hard to watch. I was like, man, there is potential for it to be finished in that first round off of those elbows. Did not happen that way. The other note that I had that I thought was unfortunate was that front body kick that worked in the first round one time, returned multiple times going forward for John Jones. And Stipe was not blocking any of them in any way, not turning his body out in any way. I mean, it was just right up in the same spot over and over again, time and time again. And I was just like, man, those are going to add up for sure. The shot that ended up finally dropping him was not the same shot, but you soften the midsection and up enough. Obviously, it's a lot easier to land the shot that did end up finishing. So, Stipe did look slightly better in the second, but still stiff. That was the other big note. We talk about the Tyson fight, of course, in a second here. Him looking stiff, Stipe also looking stiff. And by that third round, Stipe was just spent. John was eating him alive. Then ultimately the spinning kick not to the liver side, to the spleen side, probably broke a rib or something like that.
Oh,
Stipe,
they actually just posted it. Let me actually get it for you while you finish.
yeah, sure. So just to finish, yeah, it was there was definitely damage to that side enough to drop him, even if it didn't hit the liver, but because of course those liver shots are so devastating and debilitating within the moment. Stipe was able to get himself back up. He was fine after all was said and done, but it was hard to watch, and this was the point that will be made about the Tyson fight is one that can be made here. I think that this was a lot of wishful thinking for people like myself, who really would have liked to have seen the greatest upset in the history of this sport in Stipe being able to pull out the victory. But the thing that was supposed to happen and most likely to happen ended up happening.
So Stipe suffered from rib fracture and a kidney and spleen laceration.
There you go. So that
And
makes perfect sense.
yeah, and I think it was kind of funny that John Jones gets on the mic and he's like, "Yep, I knew it was over. I hit him right in the liver." And Joe Rogan's like, "It's actually it was the other side."
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's funny. Joe had to correct him on that, so that was really funny. Also to note is that John Jones effectively used the Donald Trump emote. Bo Nickel, learn. You do it after a finish, brother. You do it after a finish, dude. And I think it's crazy that one, that this fight was made, and two, that Stipe, God, man, the fact that you got off the couch to take this payday, I respect it because you're a fucking G. So I take all them elbows and really not give a fuck. There's been plenty of pictures of him on the bottom, and like you can just see his face, like he's just there, like he don't really care that elbows are just fucking mashing his face to butter. And then the body kick, you could tell it was starting to get bad when he like claimed one was a low blow, which was kind of odd from Stipe. I was like, dang, that kind of doesn't seem like something Stipe would do, like try to brush off a low kick, but it was really up to the belly. But that spin kick, man, it was perfectly placed, and Stipe just couldn't take it anymore, man. He's just too old. That's really what it was. Unfortunately, I don't even think prime Stipe would be able to handle this. John Jones is just able to do what other heavyweights cannot, and that is fucking kick. He's able to kick and use his kicks effectively. Not only was the teep and the spin kick, if you notice how the first takedown in the first round was set up, is he went for his infamous side kick to the knee, and he completely whiffed. But he realized, oh, I'm behind Stipe now, and then just fucking flipped him. Like it was just a instant. I know I'm 3 steps ahead of you. There's no other heavyweight that is going to realize John Jones just took a step behind me before he trips me. I mean, that's evidently what's going to happen, other than Tom Aspinall, but we'll see. Surreal Gone is one of those dudes where I think he's not going to realize quick enough that there's 3 things happening. Surreal Gone, I may throw a punch, but at that point, John is whiffing. He's already got his hands around me, and I'm being tripped. Like, you could throw any of the name out there. Sergey Spivak, fucking Tybura, Sergey Pavlovich, fucking Mick Parkin, Jailton Almeida, Derek Lewis, any of these people, you can even bring them up from, he's talking about Jamal Hill and Alex. It's like you bring those dudes up from a weight class below, they're still not going to have those those little details that you need, and not just little detail like, oh, make sure you got your hands. It's like, brother, you have to trip, grip, grab, drag. Like, you got to do all this shit in one motion. John Jones, he's just been doing it too long. So
It's definitely all of that, and it goes back to the point I made earlier that John Jones, especially at heavyweight, is a full-on, well-rounded mixed martial artist, and a lot of these other guys just are not. So, this is what you get when you have a guy who is exactly as Chase just outlined, a dude who is 3 steps ahead and effective with all three of those steps. It's legitimately an insurmountable task for everyone basically, and that's just what we're dealing with. So uh, the conclusion that we got was the conclusion that was unfortunately inevitable, and
I
yeah,
I actually want to bring up the point is what I was thinking was very likely coming up towards the fight. Like in fairy tale fashion, I was thinking like Stipe maybe has a chance. And it sucks that the only way that I saw that possible is John Jones re-injuring himself trying to wrestle.
I saw you
Fortune
floating that.
Fortunately, John Jones didn't even initiate. Like, he did the trip or whatever, but he didn't initiate by like shooting for a double or trying to get a trip after the initial slip and trip thing from Stipe. He didn't really try. He knew he didn't need to. But I do think it is crazy to think that John Jones has so many skills that are proficient that whatever he falls back on is still a like an A plus level skill. Like you're like Tom Aspinall maybe will have success on the feet because John Jones is not the best at defending. Like Stipe was even able to tag him a few times. Like you said, the second round he had some success. Maybe Tom Aspinall is able to do something with the striking, but it's just not all that you have to be able to do. So Real Gone might have been able to have some success in the striking, but it's just not enough. And I don't know, man. It's really tough to think that John Jones is older, but he's now in a position where his age isn't going to be as much of a factor due to the weight class and the competition. Once Tom Aspinall's out the way, it's like, brother, you are going to be the actual, like, GOAT is already decided, but like, you could go rack up 50 more fucking wins. You could be 50 with this skill set and be productive like right now, as long as Tom Aspinall's out the picture, of course. But
Well, so I mean that leads right into the next point. Stipe Miocic retires after this fight, but John Jones does not. We, of course, everybody was waiting on pins and needles to see what the actual decision was going to be. I don't want to pat myself on the back too hard, but I think I called this down to the T here that John Jones did not retire. Now, I mean, what ends up happening here now becomes a little bit more interesting. Dana has said that the next fight that John takes has to be against Tom Aspinall. Whether he will stick to that or not, who the hell knows? I mean, John just gets his way, so one thing today, another thing tomorrow could be the way that ends up. But if all goes according to plan, especially considering how much of an outcry there is for this fight, I would suspect that it has to happen. So that's probably what we're going to end up getting at some point coming in the future, is that Tom will finally, after all of this time, get his shot against John Jones.
it is going to be interesting. I'm excited to see what happens because I do know, and we're closely related to the people who are very excited for Tom Aspinall to get this opportunity. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how the negotiations play out because I'm sure, now that that's decided, I'm sure John Jones is in no rush to, make another fight. Like, I've already done what I was deeming as the cherry on top. It's like, I don't have to rush to fight Tom Aspinall. He can wait for me, type of deal. So it is going to be interesting to see how long it takes. Hopefully it's not another year, but um, yeah, that's what it's going to look like, I think.
Yeah. So, in an interesting way, in a somewhat roundabout way that I think is kind of unique to this sport specifically, we sort of have a very long form selling of the John Jones Tom Aspinall fight throughout all of this. Because if this was already such a foregone conclusion that he was going to beat Stipe, and this really was essentially a vanity fight for John, a legacy fight based on Stipe's lineage and his time as the top of the heavyweight heap. Now we've been throughout all of that time essentially drumming up support for the Tom Aspinall fight just inherently and naturally. So this is like a very long game of selling that fight. And now that John has officially decided not to retire, then one of these days I do think that that is going to happen, and then we really will have to see what ends up being the reality of that fight and how John ends up approaching it, how he takes it if he ends up losing. That's going to be very interesting as well. How Tom's career is going to change if he ends up losing, and then what happens to heavyweight thereafter. So this fight itself really sadly went exactly as to plan, but the future now is a little bit more interesting, and I think that that's the silver lining / takeaway from the whole thing.
Yeah, 100%.
So there you go, everybody. That is a very long and detailed breakdown of UFC 309, Jones versus Miocic. Final thoughts on this card, Chase?
This was a pretty good one. I think looking back, unfortunately, I have the thought that like John Jones maybe isn't the face of the UFC anymore. Like I think at this point, I would say Alex is a bigger superstar than John Jones. Just from looking at the numbers that I was seeing on my end, from the watch along and the videos, it's like anytime Alex is up, those crush compared to what I've seen for this John Jones pay-per-view. But maybe more people were buying the pay-per-view because they're a lot older of the fans and things like that. I do believe that this was a great card, though. It's just hard to say that I think with a performance like this and the way it ended, John Jones is the face of the UFC. I don't believe that.
Yeah, no, and I guess one last minor point here, because Toby did bring it up, is that Tom did say that he doesn't want to sit around and turn into Michael Chandler waiting around for a fight that's never going to happen. So there is a little bit of an impetus to make this fight happen. And, if to the point there, if John Jones is going to be the face or at least the GOAT, I mean, all of the things that we've talked about before and during this fight, then the collision course is set in stone, really, in my opinion. I mean, it has to happen now. Like the fan outcry is too great. All of these elements that we've talked about are in place at this point. The money will be there too. I saw that meme that was going around too of it's going to take a lot of money for me to do it, and then it's the Turkish sheik or whatever coming to save the day. However they end up getting it, I guarantee you that they're going to make the money work out for everybody involved. So just be somewhat patient for it, but keep your ears and eyes open because it's coming down the pike.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so let's switch gears here. We need to talk a little bit about this. We don't have to go into crazy detail, but we referenced it a little bit during the Miocic Jones breakdown. The Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson affair on Netflix. Did you watch any of this?
I did get home to watch the final two fights. I had it on at work, and I was able to pick through some of the earlier fights that were going on, specifically the guy from India. But it was not great for those two fights that I was trying to watch.
Yeah, well, congratulations for you to be able to watch any of it, because this was the most piss poor viewing experience I have ever had in my entire life. I was not able to have a consistent stream for more than, I would say, maybe 30 minutes at a pop, if that. I had signed up for Netflix specifically to watch this fight. I got everything in place. I'm in a location that has really solid internet. We were having to back out, go back into the app, get in the loading screen at several times. The quality would drop down. Netflix was not capable of handling the amount of bandwidth that was needed for this, and it was an absolutely god-awful experience. If you go back and watch that VOD, it's like a little time capsule of just how bad it was, and there's really nothing to say positive about that part of it. I went back and canceled my subscription and put the link to the VOD in the reason box because it was just absolutely atrocious. So that's one element of it. But as far as the fights themselves go, that they were also somewhat shit showy. I mean, there was one that was pretty decent on the undercard. I forget who the fighters were, but it was pretty competitive fight that I thought was pretty good, and it gave me some hope for what was going on thereafter. I was like, okay, this could actually be somewhat decent, even if the main event doesn't turn out to be decent. Some of this undercard's going to be going well, and then um, the Amanda Serrano versus Katie Taylor fight. I mean, it was absolutely baffling how Katie Taylor was able to eke out a victory when she not only had a point deduction, not only was outstruck, and was leading with her head the entire fight, even after the point deduction. So
Yeah.
that was awful. And then, of course, the main event fight was just exactly what everybody has already been thinking was going to happen. And again, more wishful thinking here that this was going to go any differently. But Jake Paul has just cultivated this model that works for him time and time again. And I think that the meme that I actually created and I thought was a really, really good one that I wish had gotten proliferated a little bit more was that Jake Paul is Lucy with the football to Charlie Brown at this point. Everybody thinking maybe this is going to be the time that he gets knocked out. Football just gets yanked out yet again.
I think I think also is maybe I'm not understanding just how serious that this was to people. Like, so Dana in the post show, they talked about the Mike Tyson thing, and he said that he was talking with Mike Tyson, and that Mike Tyson was very confident that Jake Paul wasn't gonna, do anything to him. And I'm thinking like, I thought this was a show for my. I thought Mike Tyson was in on this. Like, I thought they were going to have like a little fun boxing match. I didn't think Mike Tyson was going in here like, oh, he's not going to be able to hit me at all. Like, come on. Like, what are you talking about? This was a 60-year-old man. He got hit. And it was very clear that if Jake Paul probably wanted to murder this dude, he probably could have. This was a 60-year-old man. Now, whether Mike Tyson was very confident that nothing was going to happen to him and whether Jake Paul was pulling his punches at a certain point, it was very clear watching that Mike Tyson might have a fucking heart attack, and we are gonna all witness it. I deadass was sitting here like, what are the odds that everybody in the world is watching one of the greatest boxers die because we wanted, like, because we can't help ourselves. Like, this is what we paid for. We paid to watch a dude fucking die, and it was really close to it. Whether he was going to get knocked out or he was just going to die of exhaustion, I think we were so close to either of those being like a very close reality. And this was just such a weird fucking experience because I also got like the vibe, like I'm watching like other videos later, like from Jake Paul's side, and I'm like thinking like, you weren't like, this wasn't satirical. You weren't like just having a playful little, like, you actually were going out here to fight Mike Tyson on a boxing match. Like, I'm confused on like the actual reality to this. Like, I thought this was fourth wall breaking type, like, oh, I'm gonna fight Mike Tyson. I'm gonna be the first to knock him out. It's like, I thought this was a joke. I didn't think Mike Tyson and Jake Paul actually were gonna like act like box. Like, I don't know.
Well,
It's kind
I
of
mean,
weird.
it was a pro fight sanctioned. I mean, it's on both their records, all that element of it. I mean, the commission had to get involved, and all of the trappings were as a pro fight. So there, I mean, whether or not that matters or not, of course, boxing is so rife with all kinds of corruption and all that kind of thing. Uh, on paper, at least, this was supposed to be a competitive fight. I mean, what they were billing it as and all this kind of stuff. What we got was, yeah, exactly as expected. A younger guy going in there, dancing around, picking a couple of shots against a dude who looked so stiff. I mean, it was hard to watch for that element of it. And as you were saying, I mean, just the potential for the damage to be a lot worse to Tyson was very evident from the first round of it. Tyson came in with his knee wrapped up. Vitz was saying it looked like he might have had a back brace under some of the wraps as well on his back. I mean, so it's like this dude is barely able to stand upright. He is really not moving in any significant way, was not throwing any kind of punches of his own, really just getting picked from the outside. Jake was moving pretty decently. I mean, he's not exactly a prodigy boxer, but when you're fighting with such an age discrepancy against a guy who has no business being inside of the ring anymore, this is exactly what was supposed to happen. And Jake Paul, again, like what I had said on the watch along or I said it on the 309 watch along after the fact, saying that Jake Paul has cultivated a a system that works for him and everybody is buying into just because they don't like him. So if I have to go to UFC Tampa now and watch Colby Covington go get his ass kicked by Joaquin Buckley because Colby Covington has a character that works to an extent or worked for him to an extent, but he's not winning his fights anymore. It's a little bit of a different scenario there. With Jake Paul, I think he has it down to a T. He picks his opponent. They're all handpicked. Everything is by his set of rules and standards, so to speak. Like, he dictates the all of the elements that go into what you end up seeing in the final product. It's his production company that was putting on the event. He's making double the money that Tyson was making for this based on all of these factors. So it's like I really like my opinions about Jake Paul have sort of evolved over time to where I'm like, do I like that he is involved in combat sports? Not particularly, but I got to respect that he has harnessed this hatred that people have for him to the point that he is making insane money.
Yeah, it actually is the point. It's like, at a time, Jake Paul was kind of trying to take this boxing thing seriously. Like just a little bit ago, in July 20th or whatever it says, when Tyson, suffered the ulcer, whatever, he fought Mike Perry and won. And then just before that, he fought Nate Diaz. Yes, he was older. Just before that, he fought Anderson Silva. Like, maybe I'm misremembering the time frame, but it is interesting that he at a time was trying. It looks like when he went up against Tommy Fury, maybe some people say he won, some people lost. It was a split decision, whatever it was. But now he definitely is just leaning into, if he's ancient and I can create the rule set, fuck it, we'll do it, we'll run it. I don't care. I don't care about being the pro anymore. If they're gonna pay to see me, I guess I'm as professional as they get.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really all there is to say about it. Just how much of a unfortunate display that this was, and that, I mean, it's yet again another thing like what Chase was saying about um, the element of you're the ones watching it, you're the ones feeding into it. So it's like if you continue to do that, if you feed into what this guy is putting out here, he's just going to continue to do it. You don't like bad movies, don't go to pay to see them. If you don't like bad fucking spectacle boxing, don't fucking feed into the hype that is created around it, because now we got to see who the next past their prime combat sports figure is that he decides to go and beat up on for a while. Because, it just seems to be the trend that he's going to continue to do this. There was that one guy at the press conference that had asked him, if you win this, are you going to actually fight somebody who is at your weight and age and relative skill level? And he just completely sidestepped the question.
Oh, you're that fucking dumbass from the other show.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Of course. A nice way to deflect entirely, jackass. He's asking a legit question that you have no answer for. But we are the suckers here, people. So, I mean, I just want to make that clear that, like, if you don't like what is happening here, then do not feed the troll, because he is now the ultimate troll plus $40 million.
No,
So,
I think it's also to the point is like this is perfect marketing because like you said, we're the ones feeding into it. But what Dana was making the point on at the post show is like you guys don't fucking complain. You got a quote unquote free show. Everybody has Netflix. You just got a boxing promotion that you didn't have to pay for, and it was on Netflix, and you got to just sit back and enjoy. So enjoy what you get, and it's probably going to happen again. And this is the perfect place for it to happen. It's going to be able to be shoved down your throat. Like, I can't tell you how many people left work, how many customers that I saw that day talking about Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. The average person, the soccer mom, the father, the ancient old vet, like they had some type of impression from this fight. they went home to watch this. Whether they made it to the fucking main event and stayed up, I don't fucking know. But they at least clicked it once. And that's all Netflix needed to know. It's like, people are going to watch this. We can give them more money next time. Because whether the production was what we needed to be, or whether, you know, all the other factors on the outside, it's like, this is a profit. We are going to make money here as long as we just keep pumping this kid, Jake Paul, full of money. So,
Yeah, well, whatever the case may be in that regard, I just hope that if there are any more combat sports on Netflix in any capacity, that they get their fucking shit together. Because if I have to sit through an experience like I had with this fight again, I am going to rip my goddamn hair out, and it is going to look very, very unpleasant for anyone who happens to be viewing on the watch along. So, whatever the case may be, because there were some discussions at one point, or at least some rumblings, not discussions, but some rumors going around that when the ESPN Plus deal ends for the UFC and they're looking for a new home, perhaps Netflix might be a welcoming participant for them. If that's the case, they need to get their shit together in a major way, because this cannot happen again. I mean, like, as far as like a regular product goes. I mean, granted, they're not going to have the same concurrent viewership for something like that, but it was very telling that the concurrent viewership was exactly the reason why these problems were happening. Because before the actual Jake Paul fight, and immediately after the Jake Paul fight, the fight itself I'm talking about, the stream problems suddenly dissipated. You know, for the first like maybe hour or so of the broadcast, we were able to watch along pretty okay. After the fight had ended, we were back to being okay. So it was really a bandwidth issue, at least for us. Some people had different experiences than others, but either way, like, they need to get their infrastructure fucking taken care of, because this is, I mean, it was absolutely atrocious. It's the only way to put it.
yeah, I 100% agree. I also wanted to ask you if you've noticed. So Netflix actually put on a new show. The only reason I bring it up is because it is related to the UFC. It's called The Cage.
I've
It's
heard
a
about this.
it's
Yes.
a it's a drama series that just came out, and I believe, if I'm looking at the cast right, this is probably what Surreal Gone was filming. In the times that he was not fighting, he is listed on the cast, of course. George St. Pierre is on it. Morgan Cherie. These are all French, you know, Canadian French, I guess, George St. Pierre, whatever you want to say. And it is also a French production company who is making it. I don't know the relation between UFC and this company. I was trying to find it real quick to see if they're in some way relation. But interesting show that I think we should probably see what's up about one day.
Yeah, I can dig that. I mean, it would have
John
been
Jones
nice.
is in it too, actually, I think.
Right. That's I was going to make that point. Yeah, I had heard about John Jones being on it. I would have been happy to keep my Netflix subscription. You know, I would have. I like stuff on Netflix. There are shows that I would have wanted. I like Squid Game. Fucking little Yama Cat has this little Squid Game freaking toy thing with all the little Squid Game icons on it. I like Netflix just fine. Don't make me cancel my motherfucking subscription because you can't handle the event that you promised me. But
Yeah.
that being said, yes, I would like to watch this Cage show, and it's unfortunate that I no longer have the subscription. Maybe I'll be able to binge it before the window of time that I have left on it expires. But anyway,
Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, Netflix, I definitely was experiencing the same things with the stream. Mine was turning potato at times. It was freezing. Audio was going out. It was unfortunately lackluster, but it was the first live promotion that Netflix had going. So, take what you can get. It'll be better next time, you can assume.
I hope. I did think it was kind of telling that at times I switched over to some less than legitimate streams just to see if I could catch anything on there, and they were
And they
having
were,
problems. So
yeah,
yeah, so amazing. The entire world having different versions of shit shown to them. Apparently, Europe did pretty okay, and Australia. So some of the non-U.S. territories got it a little bit better. Their internet's a little bit better in general over there, from what I understand. So congratulations if you got a nice clean feed of it, but the majority of the world, or at least the United States, I guess, did not. So yeah, fix your shit, Netflix, because you cannot pirate something that you paid for. So I
yeah,
feel no shame about that. But even the pirates were having a hard time with it. So
right.
anyway, I guess that's all we got to say about that one. We're going pretty long. Do you want to take a quick look at Macau?
Oh, yeah, we can look at it.
Yeah, let's take a quick look at it. Why not? All right, let's.
Because there is something that I want to note that is very interesting off rip.
Sure. All right. Well, then this is how we will, of course, close out the broadcast here for us. Taking a quick look at UFC Fight Night, Jan versus Figueiredo, taking place in Macau over there in Asia. This is an early card for us Americans. But what did you want to note?
That Peter Yan is a minus 320.
That is crazy.
This is like almost as much of a coin flip as I thought a coin flip could get. Like this is two dudes that when I look at Peter Yan, I think he's on his way, making some good wins and a comeback after whether you want to believe that it was a little scandalous how he didn't get the belt back or whatever. He honestly, I think he believes that. He said some stuff in interviews about Dana screwing him over before, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he is looking very crisp at where he's at right now. And I think he's one of these dudes that you can put him in a 5-round fight and he's going to figure it out. But when I look at across the cage at Figgy, this is a dude who has gotten championship status somewhere else. He is getting a little older, but he's got the experience that matters. He's going up a weight class, which he's very more natural at. And I think he's just adopted the style of Peter Yan. I think Figgy right now fights more like Peter Yan than Peter Yan has been fighting. Like Figgy is just the Terminator right now. And I swear he's just like, look, knocking Cheeto down is one thing, but being a flyweight and doing it is something completely different.
For sure.
And he's got great wrestling. The grappling is just always going to be there. That's look, body weight technicalities. Like it's just something that's never going to go away. You're always going to know how to grapple once you figure it out and you've mastered it. Figgy's going to be able, like, I don't know. I just really think this is so disrespectful. Plus 250 for a champion. No, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean that's a great dog, though, man. I mean you got to be fucking adding up a couple parlays with Figueiredo on it with that kind of money. I mean that or at the very least, throw a nice hefty straight on that one because
Yeah,
that's crazy. That's not. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean this really probably should be a pick 'em. But yeah, I mean I think that it's a good fight and certainly one that it has a lot riding on it for both guys. Jan has had such a wild kind of navigational road with all of the elements that he has in his career. Of course, we kind of touched on with all of the Aljamain Sterling stuff, and then thereafter, of course, Sean O'Malley. I mean, the very close fight there. Like, there's a lot. His story is just this winding road of a lot of weirdness that he really should be course correcting with. This fight would be a really nice course correction for him because of the status that Figueiredo commands based on the elements that you just outlined. So a lot riding on it for him. And of course, for Figueiredo, it's the exact other side of it. He's been tearing through guys. His story is being written in a much more succinct and forceful way, I would say. I mean, he's looking great in every one of his fights at this weight class and coming through really beelining for a title shot based on how he's performing. So this fight right here is kind of a make or break for both these guys in different ways. So I really like this fight.
yeah, no, seriously, this is for a main event. Like, gosh, this is one of the ones for a non-pay-per-view main event. Like, it doesn't get better than this. I'm not gonna lie, these are really fucking good.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. So who are you going for?
I think I am gonna go for Figgy, guys. I really do. I think when you look back, okay, let's see. Okay, he got the TKO. What was that? Doctor stoppage.
Versus
Against Moreno. Yeah, Doctor stoppage
oh
TKO.
yeah.
Okay, and he did get subbed by Moreno. Damn, why do I feel like it went to decision more than this? Okay, draw is crazy. Decision with Moreno. I mean, he did get subbed. Let's see who is.
I mean that's all flyweight still.
Yeah, but I'm thinking like Peter Yan, he's lost in this division already. Kind of deal. Figueiredo is still like the only time he's lost is like championship level kind of deal. And with Sean O'Malley, with same thing with and Marab and Aljo for Peter Yan. But I don't know. It is just an interesting fight. There's so many things that go into it. I think. Gosh.
Yeah, I like. I think the issue for me when it comes to picking who I think is going to win the fight is really coming down to what version of Piotr Jan shows up for this fight. Like, I mean, and that's kind of wild to say because you're like, oh well, I mean, he always shows up, and it's like you're right, he does always show up, but it's like he now has to tailor his style to what Figueiredo is going to be bringing, and that's what concerns me. So it's not necessarily what version of him shows up; it's what he's going to be encountering and how he responds to it. And that I think is like I think that this is a the type of fight that he hasn't necessarily encountered like as often in the UFC. I mean, this is a extremely well-rounded fighter in Figueiredo. Like, I mean, like Figueiredo is the type of dude that it's like if one thing is not working for him, he can easily take it to another, level change, go somewhere else. He'll take it to a different territory if he's not liking what he's standing on currently. So
Yeah.
I think that just off of versatility alone, I think that I might be going for Figueiredo as well. But if we see vintage Piotr Jan, who is going to go out there and like, I guess this is another element to note is that Piotr Jan is a slow starter. So I was going to say if he gets off the blocks quickly, then he might be able to navigate the fight a little bit better than if he didn't. But he never really does get off the blocks quickly, so that's another element to add. I mean, this is a 5-round fight, so it's not as important to get out the gate as quickly, but still, like I guess all what I'm trying to get at with all of this is that like if he is able to fight his own fight and not Figueiredo's fight in vintage form, then yes, Piotr Jan still has a chance to win this one. Certainly, he's got a very good chance of winning this one. Obviously, he's a minus 320 favorite in it. But I just think that Figueiredo has a very good knack at making the fight that he wants to fight happen. I mean, the
Yeah.
Cody Garbrandt fight is a perfect example of it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, he was cooking that fight even before it got to the ground. Figgy was going to eat him up on the feet, and that's somebody who that's championship level striking. That's somebody who was able to beat a Hall of Fame striker with his striking, and
Right.
Figgy was able to just make it look like another day at the office. So
Yeah. So I
he's
mean,
honestly crazy.
yeah, and that would be my advice. I don't not out here trying to give advice to pro level elite athletes over here, but if there was anything that I think that Piotr Jan could benefit from, it would be if you're going to take that first round off like he often does to quote unquote download the information they like to say, then you better use all of that information effectively for all 4 rounds thereafter because you really cannot drop a round to Figueiredo and think that you're going to be in the clear for 4 rounds thereafter.
100%.
So, all right, moving on down the line a little bit. Yan Xiaonan versus Tabitha Ricci. I like this fight. It's a little bit interesting that Tabitha Ricci is getting this fight, but only I say mainly because Yan Xiaonan is just challenged for the belt. But Tabitha Ricci 11-2. I guess it's not that crazy.
This is somewhat of a short notice for Ricci, though. Like I wanted to make sure that I was remembering it right. That she just fought
Yes,
in
yeah, that is a good
August.
point too. Yeah. A
Yeah.
quick turnaround for her.
And Angela Hill is not really that fucking good.
Right. Well, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, like the depth of competition for Tabitha Ricci is it's good, not great. I would say.
I unfortunately don't hope we see a situation like Steve Urseg where they go up to the belt, they get a very close competition, they come back down, and then they get handled, and then we're like, well, fuck, like that was somebody who was supposed to be like the dark horse. Now it's
That
like,
was literally what I was just going to say. It's
yeah,
not necessarily with Steve Urseg as the framing of it, but that's a perfect example of it for sure. Is that that is the fear with Yan Jianan right now, because I really thought that she had a good shot of being the one to go out there and snatch that belt. I was like I wasn't riding with her 100%. Like she wouldn't have been like the crown jewel of the parlay, but I was like, as an underdog pick, I think that you could do a lot worse than her. She's big, and and her striking's pretty goddamn good. I think that this is going to be a lot different of a fight for her. This is going to be a lot more striking heavy, so I think she will have a lot of opportunities to let her hands go. But you're right. If this is like one of those situations where they brush greatness and then can't regain that level again, it's going to be unfortunate. And also, I mean, based on what we were just saying about Tabitha Ricci, it would be kind of unfortunate in that regard as well, because I just don't think that Tabitha Ricci is elite level personally. So it's like
this
for
should
her,
be a fraud check. This should be humbling at least.
I mean, at the very least, it needs to be extremely competitive both ways, because I mean, both of these ladies are ones that can show up. I mean, like, I'm not trying to say Tabitha Ricci is going to just go over there and fold, but like, this should not be the situation that we're outlining here. This should not be the backslide for Yan Xiaonan after touching, or orbiting the belt and then crashing back down to earth, and then Tabitha Ricci overtaking that and possibly having the same fate thereafter.
Yeah, 100%.
So, I mean, I'm going to ride with Yan Xiaonan on this one.
Yes.
She
dropped Wei Li like 4 times in their fight. Like,
exactly,
she's a dog.
Right.
And then just to the point that the fact that she was able to get as many knockdowns as I feel she did and then still lose, like, Wei Li is so fucking good, guys.
Yeah, hell yeah. It's true. It's we talk about the greats of men's MMA when, these dominant women are like, we have several almost John Joneses in the women's side of the sport to an extent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I mean, for whatever reason, even with the short notice aspect of it and all of the elements we just talked about, still only a -210 on their book here. And Tabitha Ricci has a +175, which seems pretty goddamn close. So yeah. I don't know. Maybe they know something that we don't there, and maybe Tabitha Ricci is about to shock the world, but I'm riding with Yan.
Next, I want to talk about how this Muslim Salikov dude probably has some information on Dana, because how does he keep ending up on main cards? The last fight that I've seen him in with Ponzinibbio, I just can't imagine this dude being like, how do you get here, dude? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it is rather perplexing. I mean, remembering back to that fight as like the battle of the geriatrics, I think is like kind of,
that was a co-main event too.
That is insane. And to have that type of fight as a co-main, and then for him to come back around as not the co-main, but the fight just under co-main, this is wild work over here. And I mean, also Song Kanan, I mean, look, you want to have a regional fighter in that slot. Sure. That's fine. That works. I still would think that Song Kanan could have gone up against somebody different, better, perhaps, but all of that being said, Salikov did win that fight that we were talking about. So,
and he is coming out the favorite here at 40 years old. It's just crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, in this one, Song has had a little bit of a rocky go of it himself lately. So there is potential for Salikov to essentially do what he did against Ponzinibbio, which is basically just be slightly better. You know what I mean? Like, that's really all he had to do in that fight, was just be a little bit better, which was still not great, but that's just the level of fight that they were in. I want to believe that Song can take this fight. I want to believe it.
It's just absolutely baffling to me that a dude like Salikov can make a co-main event, not in the Apex, mind you. I'm looking at it right now. This was in Denver, Colorado, and now we go to China, and now here he is again on the main card. It's like, Salikov, you are not good. How do you must have a really good agent. That's really all it is.
Well, I mean, he's one of those.
It's probably Ali too, but
Yeah. He's one of those characters in the video game that you see over and over again. You turn a corner and you're like, "Damn, I'm fighting this guy again." Yeah. But really, I think that at +150, it's still close enough. I would think that this is also a good dog, but Song Kanan really needs to win this fight as well, because, as I said, he has been kind of shaky lately. So he needs to course correct if he wants to stick around. This would be a really bad loss to take. And again, like the way that this fight is probably going to play out is not going to be like super high level technicality. So like, just go out there and be just a little bit better, please.
Just be just a smidge better. Like,
that's all you got to do. I mean, I would worry a little bit about the wrestling. That would be the only thing that I would think is going to be to his detriment. I think Salikov, if he's able to get him down, he's probably going to have a good amount of size on him. So, I mean, but they're saying that's 6 foot to 5'11". So I mean, maybe not, but I don't know if those numbers are exactly correct. Either way, heft on him, I think, is probably what's going to be the difference maker there. So keep it on the feet, Song, and please just be just that slight little bit better for your own sake.
Next,
all right, more entertaining one.
This could have been right up. That could have been one fight higher, or at least be the first fight of the main card. This fight here.
I think it's only purely because we're talking about Tong Wang. Wang Tong versus Gabriela Fernandez. The only reason being is that she's so new to the organization. That's it.
And she might smoke another girl. Like, I mean, you're at a point where it's like, once you see them smoked you smoke somebody in the debut, the next fight isn't going to be that high of a competition jump. It's like, we might see another What did Brendan Fitzgerald say? 2 shots on a Saturday night is all you need, and Wang Tong is ready to drop them bombs again.
Yeah, two-shot Tong over here, man. I mean, I want to see it. I like she is the exact type of fighter that we need in women's MMA. Like, if she's able to do that, we got to see what her ground game is like. Like, that's going to be a big differentiator for sure. If she's able to hold her own in any respect on the ground, then I mean, the power is there. Obviously, the technique looked really nice as well. For the shot that she landed, there wasn't enough fight to really give you the full-on impression, but you got to always remember this is a chick who beat Valentina Shevchenko in
I
kickboxing.
also want to note that I don't maybe understand these numbers that we're seeing on ESPN. What is the or sub average? How does she average 7.32? What does that mean? What does that actually mean? Is that
Uh,
is that almost 7.5 subs a game that or a match that she's throwing up? Like, where is this?
I would
What are these
guess that
numbers here?
I would suspect that that's subs accomplished over subs attempted. But how? I mean, what's her sub
Yeah,
count?
that's what I'm saying. She's only
Oh yeah,
done.
so
She
she
only
has she
subs
does
maybe
have
20.
one.
She's got two technically.
Oh,
Look at the two. Look at the top right. It shows it.
oh, sorry, I didn't see
Yeah,
the.
yeah.
Got you. Okay. Um, well then, where's the
So
other?
that
Oh, so I guess maybe just not listed
I
here.
mean, you go. Yeah, you go to see
Oh,
all
the
of it.
right. My
It'll.
bad.
No,
Yeah. I got
you're
you.
wrong one.
Other one. sorry.
Yeah. No,
Trying to
yeah.
navigate
The
here. Okay,
first
so in
one.
her first one. So yeah. So I guess that's what I would think it is. Is that it's the amount of times she's attempted submissions versus how many she's actually accomplished.
See, I mean, I guess it's a pretty high number compared to everybody else's I'm seeing. Maybe she's decent on the ground. Who knows?
Perhaps. I mean, and look, and if she is, look, that's the only thing that's sticking out to me is something that we need to watch out for as a possible detriment to her. If she's got that element as well, then this is a true killer in the making right now. I mean, you're seeing the potential for a chick who could be raising herself very, very high up the rankings very, very quickly. You want to talk about hot shotting? This is how you make hot shotting happen. You don't have it handed to you.
And she's charismatic.
Yes.
She's got an interesting factor to her. Not that it's not the Joker thing that's interesting to me. It's just why didn't she choose Harley Quinn? Like, why'd you want to be the boy version? Like Harley Quinn's just as good, I guess, but why'd you want to be the Joker? I don't know. That's what's just interesting to me. It's like she obviously does her own thing. Like she's not coming out here dressed as something that we would obviously expect. She's dressing as a fucking male character, which is whatever. Like I mean, it's just interesting to say the least.
Yeah, well, that element of it aside, I actually thought that speaking to her charismatic nature, when she did get on the microphone after the victory, she was talking that shit. She was saying, "Yo, why the hell am I opening up a card? I'm on the early prelims. Fuck this. You need to be shooting me up. You saw what I just fucking did. Like, she was laying it on there. I mean, the way that she was talking to the organization, and obviously they listened. So, look, again, this is an example of you making your own opportunities. She capitalizes on an extremely well placed and powerful shot that was a first round knockout, which is very rare for women's MMA. Um, that is exactly how you get yourself into the positions that she's hoping to accomplish here. So go out and do it again. She lays her out. We could be seeing a star in the making.
100%.
I like it, and I am certainly going for her. I mean, even though that price tag is kind of ridiculous as a -1,000, but we know why.
Yeah.
All right. Volkan Oezdemir versus Carlos Ulberg. Like to see that Carlos Ulberg finally got rebooked after all of that fucking
Jamal Hill
do.
shit.
Yeah, God, the cursed fight that was. So nice to see Ulberg finally booked again, going up against Volkan Oezdemir, who people thought that Volkan was a little bit of a slouch, but man, did he get the job done in his last fight.
I can understand why people thought he was kind of a slouch. Actually, he subbed Gushkov. That's actually crazy that he's submitting people. I didn't know that Oezdemir was.
Yeah, I mean he's got a slight candy cane in there for a little bit, just a little bit of checkering. But I mean, when he wins pretty emphatically.
Yeah, I mean, knocking out Johnny Walker at this point is like walking down the street. So it's whatever. But Ulberg is definitely an opponent on the feet that makes me question if Uzdemir is going to be able to get it done, because like he's kind of one of these heavy, or not heavyweights. That was the point of it. He's kind of one of these light heavyweights that's pushing the boundaries to heavyweight. Like he has the
Sure.
skill set of a heavyweight, but he's just not heavy enough to be there. Like I when I watch him fight, he doesn't give me Alex. He doesn't give me Jamal Hill. He doesn't give me, these type of dudes that are a little slender, a lot more quick. Like Uzdemir is more calculated and just like the type to just drop bombs rather than have like a volume set of striking.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I think that based on that point alone, like this is actually a really like what I would consider somewhat of an even fight. Again, these odds seem to be a little strange to me as well. I'm glad that you pointed that out early because looking at these numbers, I mean, minus 270 for Carlos Ulberg. I mean, I would think that he is a little bit maybe like a little bit quicker. I would say he's probably moves a little bit faster, and his technicality is really nice on the feet. But like all of what we just talked about with Vulcan, it's like I mean I kind of put them both in the same sort of general category. So like it would seem to me to be a little bit closer than these odds are making it out. I would ultimately probably go with Vulcan. I know that that sounds kind of crazy based on the record, but like I think that he's the type of guy that can win this specific fight.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah,
don't
I
know. I
mean,
mean, maybe
Ulberg
I'm
is
completely
still
off
very
base.
new, but you hating on the Islanders. I don't know, man.
Oh,
That's
never that, never that. Don't put that on me. But no, and it's not even that. I mean, like Ulberg is he's newer, but I mean,
He's
yeah,
been
no,
doing. Listen, look how long he's been doing it in the UFC, though. I actually, that's actually something to note. Is like these aren't just run of the mill over different promotions. He's been doing this in the UFC for a minute.
it's true. That is a good point. I mean, and he is on like a crazy win streak as well. I do I just I don't know. This is the type of fight. Like this fight right here reminds me of what I thought that the Paul Craig Bo Nickel fight could have been. I thought that it was like, okay, well, you got this guy who's like a little bit of a hot shot. You see that the elements could sort of be there. Now, granted, I mean, Ulberg is an actual full-on, well-rounded mixed martial
Yeah,
artist, so circumstances are slightly different. But I thought if there was ever going to be a time where a vet could come in here and show that there are levels, this would be the one. I think that this might be why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking about this one.
yeah, it could be interesting if Vulcan can sub Gushkov. I'm not saying that Ulberg and Gushkov have the same level of like ground defense or whatever, but I think that shows that like if he knows the striking is not in his favor, he will take it to the ground. And whether that means Ulberg can, have some success or not, it just means it's going to give a different look to the fight for the fight in general. If Uzdemir decides to take it to the ground, then we're looking at a lot of different questions if Ulberg is able to win. We know he can maybe win on the feet. That's more likely. But is he able to win if it gets to grappling?
For sure.
Winning is the key. Not doing well, winning.
Right, exactly, and to that point, that would be the keys to success for Uzdemir would be to not engage in any kind of crazy firefights, especially not early in the fight. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think you're going to go out there and just stand directly in front of Carlos Ulberg and not take a hellish amount of punishment for doing so, then you got another thing coming.
Yeah, 100%.
So, I mean, I think it's a slight long shot to be sure, but I'll ride with the dog on it. I'll ride with the dog and I'll take my lumps for it. Going on down the card here, a lot of regional fighters. I would say I don't know if I'm necessarily too familiar with a number of
Oh, right
these.
here. The next one, Lonier.
Oh well, yes, of course. Our buddy Lonier Kavanaugh. Shout out to the homie Am from the chat, a student of Lon as he calls him. And
Yeah, so this one will be probably good, especially early up on the card. It'll be a very fun one to watch, I'm sure.
sorry, it's seven.
Yeah, you're fine.
I don't know what's going on
Um,
there. My bad.
Yeah,
Um,
I think this one will be fun. Coming off the Contender Series, he's a big favorite, and he's facing a Peruvian fella. Actually, fun to note. We just had one with James last week, so this one will be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and going back to his win on the Contender Series, good lord, did he? I mean, you talk about a knockout. This dude was. I mean, like I was at the time of watching it on the Contender Series, kind of worried that his opponent was going to need like serious medical attention. Like this dude was out and out for. I mean, a minute is like an understatement. He was probably out for close to two.
Yeah.
He needed to be helped to the stool. I mean, it was like, now granted that could just be the conditioning of the chin of that person, of course, but it takes a heavy shot to do that to somebody, and Lonier Kavanaugh certainly was the one to do it. So
I think what was important to note, one, these are flyweights. These dudes are going to go after it. Two, is Lonier is one of these dudes that's going to stand with you, and he's gonna feel you out. Once he realizes that you don't have what it takes to put him out, he knows he has that right hand ready to put you out, and he's able to do it. And he's able to bait you into a situation where he's gonna come out with a better advantage in that predicament.
absolutely. So, heavy favorite in this fight at a minus 370. I would say that favorite's probably going to pull through. And then, I mean, the only other real name that sticks out to me was Mahasharte is opening this one up against Nicholas Mata. I think that has the potential to be competitive. Um, this is one that Mahashate probably should get the victory on, and start off a good trend for the locals.
Yeah, well, for 100%, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, looking at any of these other names, I was there any other one that stuck out to you wanted to talk about? Because
No, I think that was a bit, like you said, it's just a bunch of regional guys that we're hopefully going to learn names from.
and that is why watching cards like this is important, because these fighters from other parts of the world that are going to be coming up and showing out in the organization over here, they start out on cards like this. You get a feel for what you're getting into, and your betting analysis becomes that much better. So, and of course, also a lot of potential for these fights to be very entertaining. Generally, from this region of the world, I mean, you're seeing a lot of bantamweights, flyweights. You're seeing a lot of smaller frames and builds on these fighters. Those divisions are extremely competitive right now. So if any of these guys shows out in a big way, they could be getting bumped up against some legitimate killers. So you want to know about these guys.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm looking at the records, and there's not adding too much promise for how notable they're going to be outside of this card here. Moving forward, 16-5, 13-3, 18-5. It's like maybe if you weren't fighting on the regional card against somebody in that region as well, like look, China, Korea, England, Korea, China. Maybe we're not going to see you do too great when it comes to whoever wins and them moving forward. But for the losers, maybe you'll get a can next time, and maybe you'll be able to do good.
Absolutely. And all I'm hoping for is that these fights are entertaining, because this card starts, everybody. If you are on the East Coast of the United States, this begins at 3 o'clock. That's a.m. So 3 o'clock in the morning. Me and Chase Parton are going to be doing individual watch-alongs. I'm going to be sitting with a very large can of Red Bull, having to keep my voice down because my neighbors will be sleeping. Um, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. It's going to be a little bit of a struggle here, but both of us will be live for our individual watch-alongs. You can watch me at Yama Show on YouTube, youtube.com/@Yama Show. Chase, I know that you can tell them where they can find you.
They can find me on youtube.com/@CPSmalls, and I'll be doing the watch along. Obviously, we'll have predictions videos out coming this week and the following weeks for every card. And then on Twitter, you can find me at Creative Parton, Partin, and it should be a good time whenever you catch me on there.
There you go. Make sure you follow my boy. New episode of Yama will be coming out this week. Hopefully, I am putting it out there so that I make sure that it does happen, talking about everything that we basically talked about today in a little bit more solid comedic form. So keep an eye on the channel for that. I can be found on Twitter and Instagram at Yama Show as well. And if you are interested, we are also streaming live to Twitch, Kick, and Trovo. In addition to YouTube, that is also at Yama Show. So keep an eye out for us. We will be around. We will be here for those fights. Have a great rest of your week leading up to the fights, everybody. And until we see you next time, as always, fight on.
It's